Gordon Ramsay is one of the world's most well-known celebrity chefs, but his reputation isn't exactly stellar. If we know anything about the movie industry, it's that Hollywood loves its sequels. It's safe to say that most would assume that Ramsay is primarily a foul-mouthed, overly harsh chef who's gained his celebrity status off of mere shock value alone. People who can't stand him report that he's rude and obnoxious, and claim that he insults, abuses, and humiliates his team. He's racked up an impressive list of haters, including some of the world's other most well-known chefs, such as Jacques Pepin and Anthony Bourdain. However, to those who've worked with Ramsay in the past, there's a different side to the story. Chefs who've worked under or with him give glowing reviews of his management style and personality off camera, noting that the bad guy persona only comes out during certain situations. So, want to know the real Gordon Ramsay? According to those chefs, here's the truth. Gordon Ramsay only gets really angry when his reputation is at stake. It could be easy to assume that working with Gordon Ramsay is a nightmare, that the man is a hot fuse ready to blow at any second. However, according to chef Christina Wilson, winner of Hell's Kitchen, Season 10, Ramsay is really quite constructive and calm during the Hell's Kitchen challenges. It's only when his reputation, or the reputation of his restaurant, is at stake that he gets really angry. In a past interview with Mashed, Wilson said, "The only time he really gets wound up is if food that shouldn't be going out of the kitchen is going out of the kitchen." But Wilson notes that it's not only Ramsay's worries for his and his restaurant's reputations that get him into a tizzy when a chef sends out undercooked scallops or a rubbery steak. She says he's also worried about the diner not getting the great meal and experience that they paid for. Gordon Ramsay is a puddle around his family. Some may think that Gordon Ramsay is hard on his kids, especially when it was reported that the celebrity chef wouldn't be passing on his wealth to them with a posh inheritance, via the Telegraph. That much is obvious from the way we're constantly bombarded with trailers, posters, promos, and news stories about upcoming franchise films. However, chef Christina Wilson was also quick to point out in the same article that Ramsay is a puddle around his family, even going so far as to say that she thinks people would be legitimately freaked out if they saw how he acts around them. Other reports point to Ramsay's solid parenting skills as well. But even as we're being inundated with info about retreads, revivals, and follow-ups, there are quite a few Part 2s, and beyond, that have successfully stayed under the radar. And while we may take it for granted that every superhero adventure and action blockbuster has more franchise filler to come, some long-gestating reunions or odds-defying continuations might totally surprise you. Mashed's feature on the so-called double life of Gordon Ramsay focuses on how he's taught his children to cook, helped his daughter with filming a cooking show, and he's even implemented a no-swearing rule for his teens and himself, at least while he's at home. From indie comedies to action epics, let's take a look at some of the sequels you didn't know were being made. Updated on August 23, 2021, sequels are hitting theaters and streaming services all the time, and we've updated this list to keep you informed on all the future films that you might have missed out on. Ramsay and his wife have been together for 20-plus years and he currently has 5 children, ranging from a recent college grad to a toddler. Gordon Ramsay is a genuinely funny guy. For all of Gordon Ramsay's serious attitude in the kitchen, previous, Hell's Kitchen, contestant Nona Johnson, née Sively, of Season 8, says that the celebrity chef also has a seriously funny side. She told Mashed that Gordon is really, really funny. We've got the lowdown on Part 2s, threequels, and installments that are decades in the making. Like really funny. So keep coming back for all the latest info on these upcoming sequels. Hotel Transylvania. Transformania. For fans of the Adam Sandler-led animated monster franchise, Hotel Transylvania, a 4th spectacular entry is on the horizon. The first 3 Hotel Transylvania films, which all center around the idea of monsters needing to take vacations from humans, were all overseen by director Genndy Tartakovsky. While Tartakovsky still is responsible for penning the script, he is stepping away from the director's chair for the 4th film. And I know that, as a viewer watching, I'm laughing because the things he says are funny, but he's genuinely really funny and he cracks jokes, and really one of the hardest things was not laughing when he would shout out in anger and frustration. She goes on to detail how her fellow chefs on Hell's Kitchen agreed with her, and it wasn't abnormal for them to talk about Ramsay's tirades, once off-screen, mentioning one moment that particularly sticks out in her mind. The TV audience never saw this, but he was shouting at everyone saying how terrible the service went and blah, 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 all of these things. And he said, You guys are trying to F*** me up the A** sideways from Sunday. And we all just stood there like, yes, chef, that's right. That's what we're doing. Yep. Because we didn't know what to do. You just went, Taking over directorial duties for Tartakovsky are DC Superhero Girls, director Jennifer Kluska and SpongeBob, writer Derek Drymon. Selena Gomez, who voices Dracula's daughter, Mavis, in the franchise, is returning to the cast of the fourth film, titled Hotel Transylvania, Transformania, and will also be serving as executive producer this time around. Also returning are Hotel Transylvania alumni Andy Samberg, Steve Buscemi, Keegan-Michael Key, David Spade, Fran Drescher, Molly Shannon, Kathryn Hahn, and Jim Gaffigan. As seen in the film's first trailer, the plot will center around an invention that turns monsters into humans and humans into monsters, which upends the reality of all of the residents of the Hotel Transylvania. Yes, chef. But yeah, we talked about that one later. Gordon Ramsay is almost like a father figure, sure. If you take Chef Christina Wilson's word for it above, that Gordon Ramsay truly is a puddle around his kids, then it's easy to see how he might make a great dad. But is he really that much of a father figure to his mentees on Hell's Kitchen and MasterChef? Turns out that answer is yes, according to Chef Corey Sutton, winner of Hell's Kitchen, Season 19. While she admits that Ramsay does indeed yell a lot, she and her fellow chefs wouldn't attempt to actively avoid his input or criticism. Instead, they did their best to win his approval and get his advice. When he's there teaching you and talking to you, like one-on-one, it's really a fatherly moment, Sutton told Mashed in a recent interview. He truly sees something in you. And he's giving you the time of day because he knows you can do it. While Hotel Transylvania, Transformania is currently set for a theatrical release on October 1, 2021, there is now buzz that the film may be shifted exclusively to streaming, thanks to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic and the rapid spread of the Delta variant. Addams Family 2, after raking in piles of cash over its opening weekend in 2019, a sequel to The Addams Family, was quickly greenlighted by MGM. Featuring the voice talents of Charlize Theron, Oscar Isaac, Chloe Grace Moritz, Finn Wolfhard, Nick Kroll, Snoop Dogg, Bette Midler, Allison Janney, Martin Short, and Catherine O'Hara, The Addams Family introduced the altogether ooky family to a new generation of young fans. Originally introduced in cartoons drawn by Charles Addams in the 1930s, The Addams Family has since been adapted for a variety of media, including the 1960s television show and a successful set of movies in the early 90s. And it's such an amazing experience to even be in his kitchen, have your name even be in his vocabulary for some time. And when he praises you on something, it's like, wow, this is a huge compliment that this multi-Michelin star restaurant chef is saying, good job. And the official synopsis for the 2021 film reads, in this all-new movie, we find Morticia and Gomez distraught that their children are growing up, skipping family dinners, and totally consumed with screen time. To reclaim their bond, they decide to cram Wednesday, Pugsley, Uncle Fester, and the crew into their haunted camper and hit the road for one last miserable family vacation. Their adventure across America takes them out of their element and into hilarious run-ins with their iconic cousin, It, as well as many new kooky characters. This is amazing. Gordon Ramsay ensures the Hell's Kitchen competition is entirely fair when it comes to cooking competitions like Hell's Kitchen. You'd probably assume that a little bit of mischief goes on behind the scenes. What could possibly go wrong? Joining the cast for The Addams Family 2 will be Bill Hader as a new character named Cyrus and Javon Walton as Pugsley. The producers probably set some things up, throw a few wrenches into the contestants' plans, etc., right? After all, isn't that what makes for good reality television? However, that's actually not the case on Hell's Kitchen, according to chef Christina Wilson. The follow-up to the animated reimagining of the mysterious and spooky family will be creeping into theaters October 1, 2021. Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends following the successful reboot of the Halloween franchise in 2018, with a film that served as a sequel to the 1978 movie while ignoring the many existing installments. Writer Danny McBride confirmed that another sequel was underway. In fact, she told Mashed that Gordon Ramsay goes out of his way to ensure the competition is incredibly fair, and the angriest she'd ever seen Ramsay was when a contestant accused him of sabotaging part of the competition. Originally, the plan was to film two sequels back-to-back, releasing them a year apart. In reality, though, there's no sabotage and there's even a lawyer on set every time there's a recorded challenge or dinner service, just to ensure no hanky-panky goes on. There's no funny business. It's a cash prize. Halloween Kills was scheduled for October 16, 2020, and Halloween Ends would have concluded the series on October 15, 2021. However, several wrenches were thrown into the works. It's handled just like a blackjack table would be. The ambitious shooting schedule wound up being too much to pull off, resulting in the filming of Halloween Kills, wrapping up with no start date for Halloween Ends on the calendar. And then the COVID-19 pandemic bumped both films back a year, so that Halloween Kills will now hit theaters on October 15, 2021, while Halloween Ends will debut on October 14, 2022. The trailer for Halloween Kills picks up immediately after the end of 2018's Halloween, when the three female leads, Andi Matichak, Judy Greer, and Jamie Lee Curtis, locked killer Michael Myers in a basement and burned the house down around him. As firefighters speed towards the house, the women plead for them to stop. "It has to be fair, all the way around," Wilson said. Gordon Ramsay is incredibly humble. Gordon Ramsay owns multiple restaurants around the world, has earned multiple Michelin stars, and has received awards and honors such as Chef of the Year and Independent Restaurateur of the Year. He's filmed an array of television programs and miniseries beyond his two most famous, MasterChef, and Hell's Kitchen, and he's a member of the Culinary Hall of Fame. But to no avail. Predictably, Michael escapes, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. It would be easy to see how he could get a big head. But it looks like this time, instead of waiting for him to hunt them down, his surviving victims will resolve to take the fight to him. Resident Evil. Welcome to Raccoon City. After 6 successful films starring Mila Jovovich, based on the successful video game series of the same name, Resident Evil is finally getting the origin story treatment, jumping back to a time before the events of the existing films, although many of the characters will be familiar to longtime fans. However, chef Christina Wilson says Ramsay is really quite humble despite all his accomplishments. In a MASH interview, she said, "He's amazing. He's absolutely amazing. He's one of the most humble and gracious men, regardless of his success in life, that I have ever met. I can't say enough how humble and generous he is." Ramsay's humble attitude, Wilson hints, could partially be credited to his modest upbringing and hardships he experienced as a child, including domestic violence and living with an alcoholic father. Gordon Ramsay isn't as much of a badass as he appears to be. Humble attitude, admirable parenting skills, and father figure mentoring all considered, you wouldn't necessarily be wrong to still call Gordon Ramsay a badass. You would, though, maybe catch some flack about that opinion from Paula Deen. In an exclusive interview with MASH to talk about her appearance on MasterChef Legends, Deen said, "The first time I ever met and worked with Gordon, I said, 'Gordon, I'm going home and I'm going to ruin your reputation.' He said, 'How's that, Paula?' I said, 'Because everybody thinks you're such a badass, and I'm going to tell them what a cream puff you really are.'" She describes Ramsay as sweet and very kind, and while he can throw around what she calls some very saucy language, she says she can dish it right back at him. The first film not to feature Jovovich, or presumably, her character, Alice, the Resident Evil prequel will star Kaya Scodelario as Claire Redfield, Hannah John Kamen as Jill Valentine, Robbie Amell as Chris Redfield, Tom Hopper as Albert Wesker, Avan Jogia as Leon S. Kennedy, and Neil McDonough as William Birkin. However, she did note that she wasn't able to quite match the level of critique that Ramsay is known for giving his chefs, saying she hates to poo-poo on somebody's parade. Gordon Ramsay is very respectful of others' culinary heritages. When public figures diss a certain culinary heritage, a whole population's ire can be quickly raised to mammoth proportions. See the Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post columnist who recently said Indian curries taste like something that could knock a vulture off a meat wagon, and subsequently caught the backlash of Padma Lakshmi. All of these characters previously appeared in other Resident Evil films, although they were all played by different actors. The film will be written and directed by Johannes Roberts, who said of his approach to the film, "With this movie, I really wanted to go back to the original first 2 games and recreate the terrifying visceral experience I had when I first played them, whilst at the same time telling a grounded human story about a small dying American town that feels both relatable and relevant to today's audiences." Roberts' approach is likely to be a significant departure from the previous 6 films, which were all directed by Paul W. S. Anderson. That's especially true since Roberts has said, via Bloody Disgusting, that he's drawn inspiration from John Carpenter's films, specifically The Fog, and Assault on Precinct 13. And if you're wondering about the plot, here's the official synopsis. Once the booming home of pharmaceutical giant Umbrella Corporation, Raccoon City is now a dying Midwestern town. Still, it's not every day that you come across a chef who's properly respectful of others' culinary heritages. The company's exodus left the city a wasteland, with great evil brewing below the surface. Gordon Ramsay, though, is one of those chefs, according to chef William Disson, who appeared on National Geographic Channel's Gordon Ramsay, Uncharted, and beat Ramsay in a cook-off. Disson told Mashed, Appalachia, "Really gets kind of a rap for being backwoods and dueling banjos country, but really has an amazing food culture and just history and heritage here. When that evil is unleashed, the townspeople are forever changed, and a small group of survivors must work together to uncover the truth behind Umbrella and make it through the night." Filming began in October of 2020, and we expect to see Welcome to Raccoon City hit screens on November 24, 2021. Army of Thieves, before Zack Snyder's bloody zombie heist film, Army of the Dead, even premiered on Netflix in 2021. The movie's producers were already looking ahead to the future of the franchise. While the ending of the film didn't seem to leave a lot of room for sequels, well, not featuring the same cast anyway, the beginning suggested multiple movies worth of backstory to mine, and that's exactly what Netflix is planning. In addition to an anime series tracing the early days of the zombie outbreak, titled, Army of the Dead, Las Vegas, the 2021 film will also receive a prequel feature centered around its expert safe cracker, Ludwig Dieter. Titled, Army of Thieves, the prequel will be directed by Matthias Schweighöfer, who will also star as the scene-stealing character. And I think that's something that Chef Ramsay saw when he was here, and we had a lot of conversations about the culture and the food, and he even made an analogy and said, "I feel like this is such an untapped region." He said, "The heirloom ingredients and the heritage cooking are on par with places like Tuscany, Italy," which to me was a pretty astounding comment. Gordon Ramsay can be just as awe-inspiring as you might think. Even though Gordon Ramsay is purportedly kind, nice, humble, etc., he still inspires a bit of awe in his fans, including fellow chefs. Nyesha Arrington is one of those chefs. The film will be set in the early days of the zombie outbreak, which is depicted only as a quick, epic montage at the beginning of Army of the Dead. According to Snyder, it will portray how Dieter's love of safe cracking came to be, and it will also reveal a link between the vault he tackles in Army of the Dead and Dieter himself. Like Army of the Dead, Army of Thieves will also feature an ensemble cast, although Schweighöfer will be the only carryover from the first film. She boasts some pretty impressive culinary chops herself, having appeared on popular shows such as Top Chef and Guy's Grocery Games, but it was seeing Ramsay for the first time that really struck her. She told Mashed in a recent article, "I worked for the chef Joel Robuchon, and probably this had to be 2008 maybe, or 2009. Joining him for the prequel will be Natalie Emmanuel, Guz Khan, Ruby O'Fee, Stuart Martin, and Jonathan Cohen." Gordon Ramsay walked through the kitchen where I was working, and I was like, oh my god. He was walking around the kitchen and looking at everyone's station, and I was in awe. It's set to hit the streamer on October 29, 2021. Sing 2 fans of 2016's animated jukebox musical, Sing, will be tapping their toes to the beat again in 2021, when Sing 2 shimmies its way onto theater screens just in time for Christmas. I just think that Ramsay has been a chef that really took cooking to the next level. Way back then, I said, well, I'd love to work with him one day. Now, Arrington is working with Ramsay on a new show called Next Level Chef, after connecting with him on the set of MasterChef. The first, Sing, centered around an American Idol-like vocal competition, conceived by a koala named Buster, Matthew McConaughey, as a way to save his struggling theater, and featured the vocal talents of Reese Witherspoon, Scarlett Johansson, and Taron Egerton as some of the hopeful contestants. Coincidentally, one of the songs performed by Egerton in Sing was Elton John's I'm Still Standing, a number he would later perform again when he portrayed John in Rocketman. Sing 2 was originally set to hit theaters December 25, 2020, but it got pushed back a year to December 22, 2021. The sequel will find Buster and his friends hoping to perform at the most prestigious venue in the entertainment world, according to Variety. She called connecting with Ramsay then a powerful moment, and working on Next Level Chef the best thing to happen to her in 2021. Gordon Ramsay isn't too big to lend a helping hand. You've probably seen the Gordon Ramsay memes that show him yelling at adult contestants and calling them such fun insults as idiot sandwich, and then show a juxtaposed image of him comforting a crying child on MasterChef Jr. However, it's not just the kids that Ramsay is willing to help as needed. According to Jenny Lamb, contestant on season 13 of MasterChef Australia, in a recent Mashed interview, she saw Ramsay's possibly scary side, as he criticized her use of salt, or lack thereof, but she also witnessed his more helpful, encouraging side. In addition to McConaughey, Egerton, Witherspoon, Johansson, Nick Kroll, and Tori Kelly, who will all be reprising their roles, Sing 2 will be adding Bono, Pharrell Williams, Letitia Wright, Bobby Cannavale, Chelsea Peretti, Halsey, and Eric Andre to its impressive voice cast. If the first film is any indication, audiences can expect a seat-dancing, toe-tapping good time. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Beginning with the first film in 1974, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films have been staples of the American horror canon for decades, with 7 sequels, comics, and a video game adaptation. Now, a 9th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, film is in the works from director David Blue Garcia and writer Chris Thomas Devlin. She said, some contestants would say he was very mean, but I remember one of us girls was really struggling with the deep fryer, trying to really lift it, put oil in, and she was tiny. This film will be a direct sequel to the original film, but it will be set many years later, with the cannibalistic serial killer Leatherface, who serves as the antagonist in all of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films, now an old man. The newest, Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, titled simply, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, will feature an ensemble cast, including names like Elsie Fisher, Sarah Yarkin, Alice Cridge, Olwen Fouere, and Jacob Latimore. And he just helped her. He goes, just leave it and I'll give you a hand. Yeah, he was really nice. Gordon Ramsay can't stand a lazy chef. We already know that Gordon Ramsay can't stand mistakes that threaten his reputation or that of his restaurants, but another thing he absolutely can't stand? According to Aaron Sanchez, who spoke with Mashed in an exclusive interview, Ramsay, as well as Sanchez, can't stand chefs who are lazy on MasterChef. What exactly makes a chef lazy in their eyes? If a chef repeatedly makes the same mistakes after those mistakes were pointed out to them, as well as if a chef doesn't try to take full advantage of all the MasterChef tools and resources to show off their skills. I think what ticks chefs off, especially me and Gordon. Plus, Marilyn Burns, who played the surviving Sally in the first film, will return to the franchise. Is laziness, Sanchez said. When we see people not trying, that's what really ticks me off, and I know it pisses Gordon off, too. Sanchez also noted that Ramsay's explosive attitudes are very authentic and not just for the cameras, but chefs shouldn't take his tirades personally, saying, it's a job. Gordon Ramsay works to bring the best out in his competitors, but despite Gordon Ramsay not being able to stand a lazy chef and giving them an authentic piece of his mind, Aaron Sanchez does say that Ramsay works very hard to bring out the best in the competitors that appear on his shows such as MasterChef, working behind the scenes to ensure they're actually learning something and only giving them challenges they're ready for.
Sanchez told Mashed, he's the one that can make the decision of, well look, I don't think they're ready for soufflés yet, or, I don't think they're ready for the restaurant challenge yet. Ramsay coordinates with producers and fellow judges to make sure shows like MasterChef aren't just a great experience for the competitors, but also the viewers at home. It's a trait that Sanchez says he's learned a lot from, as he's learned to be more judicious and tactful with his time by watching Ramsay at work. Gordon Ramsay wants contestants to leave his shows having learned something. There's a reason Ramsay operates his shows the way he does. While the details of the plot are still under wraps, producer Fede Alvarez told Bloody Disgusting that fans of the original can expect the sequel to pay homage to the 1974 film in more than just its story. All this hard work behind the scenes on Gordon Ramsay's part is to put together a show that brings out the best in competitors and leads to contestants leaving shows like MasterChef having learned valuable skills that will serve them well into their careers. Everything is classic, old-school gags, Alvarez said of the film's practical effects, adding, never VFX. Do everything on camera. It's a very old-school approach to filmmaking. Vintage lenses. James Beard Award-winning restaurateur and chef Nancy Silverton attests to this fact after appearing on Ramsay's MasterChef Legends series. Silverton told Mashed, "I really enjoy working with Ramsay. Not only because I think he cares, but I think he's so knowledgeable. And that's what really matters, is to take these contestants who are working so hard and have them leave the show learning something." It's very similar to the original film. While no official release date has been announced, the film's official website says to expect Texas Chainsaw Massacre sometime in 2021, and when it does come, it'll slash its way onto Netflix. Jackass 4. Although 2002's Jackass, the movie, was originally conceived as a farewell to the Jackass TV series, concluding the stunt-pranking antics of Johnny Knoxville and his friends in grandiose fashion, the film was successful enough to spin off multiple sequels, including Jackass No. 2 in 2006 and Jackass 3D in 2010. And I think that Gordon provides that. Now, Knoxville and friends are gearing up for a fourth Jackass flick, bringing a whole new set of outlandish stunts and pranks to the big screen. Jackass 4 Inches was originally scheduled to hit theaters on March 5, 2021, but as studios shuffled many of their release slates in the midst of 2020's industry shutdown, Jackass 4 Inches eventually got bumped to February 4, 2022. Previously, Knoxville said that if a fourth movie came into being, he would want to expand the cast to include some younger actors, but most of the original cast has also expressed interest in making a fourth film, including Steve-O, Chris Pontius, Bam Margera, Dave England, Weeman, Aaron McGaney, Rake Yohn, and Rick Kosick. However, following a series of disturbing videos posted to his social media in early 2021, Bam Margera was reportedly removed from the cast of Jackass 4. Director Jeff Tremaine will be back at the helm, having previously directed all of the other Jackass movies. Has Fallen sequels. Gerard Butler just keeps on falling. Following the success of Angel Has Fallen in 2019, Millennium Media announced plans to keep the franchise going for a fourth, fifth, and sixth film, and possibly even more than that. Alan Siegel, president and CEO of Alan Siegel Entertainment, also said that there was a possibility of the franchise spawning international TV series, which could introduce new characters that could then be brought into the film universe. And that's what makes that show so successful and why it has been on for so many years. Speaking at the American Film Markets Finance Conference in late 2019, Siegel explained, "If we do it in India, the star of that could come into Angel Has Fallen 4. It could be a symbiotic relationship. Regardless of what happens with future spin-offs and series, the next installment in the Has Fallen franchise will once again center around Gerard Butler's Secret Service agent Mike Banning, and it will be titled Night Has Fallen." The action-heavy Has Fallen films focus on Butler's character as he attempts to thwart all manner of cataclysmic conspiracies. For example, Angel Has Fallen saw Banning racing to clear his name after being framed for an attack on the U.S. President, Morgan Freeman. And Night Has Fallen will reunite the creative team behind Angel Has Fallen, bringing back Rick Romanois to direct and Robert Mark Kamen to pen the script.
Despite the studio's plans for many sequels, we don't have a solid release date yet for Night Has Fallen, and with Gerard Butler now suing the producers of Olympus Has Fallen over their alleged failure to pay the actor his share of the profits on the film, there's no telling when we may see him fall again. Scream. Nearly a quarter-century after the first, Scream slashed its way into theaters, a fifth installment in the deliciously self-aware horror franchise has wrapped filming and is headed to theaters in 2022. The original Scream, released in 1996, was the brainchild of horror visionary Wes Craven, who passed away in 2015, and Dawson's Creek scribe Kevin Williamson. The film has since spawned 3 sequels, with the most recent, Scream 4, releasing in 2011. Stars Courtney Cox and David Arquette have appeared in all 4 previous Scream installments, and both officially signed on for the 5th film in 2020. Although Cox and Arquette are divorced in real life, they got married after meeting on the set of Scream. Their characters, Gale Weathers and Sheriff Dewey Riley, should theoretically still be married in the films. Also joining the cast for the 5th Scream outing will be In the Heights star Melissa Barrera, who will be playing a new character. Franchise star Neve Campbell, who played protagonist Sidney Prescott in all 4 prior Scream films, will be back for the 5th Scream, which, somewhat confusingly, will also be called simply Scream. Although her casting was never officially announced by Campbell or the studio, her involvement was confirmed when Kevin Williamson tweeted a photo of himself alongside Campbell and Cox announcing the end of filming. Although the return of the original cast seems to indicate that Scream is a direct sequel and the title suggests a reboot, Courtney Cox suggested in May 2021 that the film is none of the above and will instead mark the beginning of a new franchise. A couple months later, Matt Bettinelli-Olpin, who's co-directing the film alongside Tyler Gillett, offered some clarity on what to expect from the film, saying, "This isn't a movie that you need to have seen 27 other movies to understand. But your experience will be extremely heightened the more knowledge you have of those previous 4. We have a ton of Easter eggs in this thing. We have so many little moments and nods, and things that are big and little, that all tie to the previous 4. So there's a bit of a puzzle aspect to it from knowing the first 4. But hopefully if you don't catch those things, it doesn't matter. It doesn't take away from your experience." Downton Abbey 2 After the hit British TV series, Downton Abbey, successfully transitioned to the big screen, continuing the story of the Crawley family and their household staff in 2019. Focus Features confirmed in 2021 that a second film is in the works. The original announcement confirmed the return of the entire cast, along with newcomers Hugh Dancy, Laura Haddock, Natalie Bay, and Dominic West. It also revealed that the film would release around Christmas 2021. However, a few months later, the film got bumped down the road a bit to spring of 2022. The entire Downton cast presumably includes all the main players from the series and first movie, including Hugh Bonneville, Elizabeth McGovern, Michelle Dockery, Laura Carmichael, Maggie Smith, Joanne Froggatt, Jim Carter, Brendan Coyle, Rob James Collier, and Penelope Wilton, among others. Tuppence Middleton, who joined the cast for the first film, also confirmed on Twitter that she'll be appearing in the sequel. No details have yet been released about the plot, but presumably, it will be set during Christmas and will follow up on the events set up in the first film, which included new romances, a pregnancy, a wedding, and a terminal illness. We'll see what twists the newest has in store for the entire Downton crew when Downton Abbey 2 hits theaters on March 18, 2022. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 When the film adaptation of the popular video game franchise, Sonic the Hedgehog, sped into theaters in February 2020, it quickly blew away the opening weekend record for video game-based movies, and even though it was forced to halt its theatrical release early due to the coronavirus pandemic, it still managed to perform well enough for Paramount Pictures to move ahead with a sequel. Announced in May 2020, the sequel will reunite the creative team of screenwriters Pat Casey and Josh Miller and director Jeff Fowler. Star Ben Schwartz revealed the release date for the sequel in a tweet that read, "Sonic 2 is officially coming to theaters the 8th of April 2022. Schwartz voiced the titular Hedgehog in the first film, and he'll be joined once again in the sequel by returning cast members James Marsden as Sonic's human best friend, Tom, Tika Sumpter as Tom's wife, Maddie, and Jim Carrey as the villainous Dr. Robotnik."
While the plot of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is still unknown, the stinger at the end of the first movie seemed to hint at the setup for a sequel, introducing the popular video game character Tails, who's Sonic's best friend and sidekick in the game. The sequel will also introduce Knuckles, a red echidna who will be voiced by Idris Elba, who in the game serves as the guardian of the Master Emerald. What role Knuckles will play in the film, though, remains to be seen. Legally Blonde 3 It's been almost 20 years since audiences followed effervescent sorority girl Elle Woods to Harvard Law School in the bubblegum-hued, Legally Blonde. She continued ascend the professional ladder in 2003's Legally Blonde 2, Red, White and Blonde, which saw Elle head to Washington, D.C. Now Elle is back, along with producer Mark Platt and his Platt Productions president Adam Siegel. In addition to starring as Elle, Reese Witherspoon will also act as a producer, this time through her Hello Sunshine banner. Originally, Legally Blonde, scribes Kirsten, Kiwi, Smith and Karen McCullough were attached to pen the script, but since then, The Office, alum Mindy Kaling and Brooklyn Nine-Nine creator Dan Gore have stepped in to completely rewrite the screenplay. We've yet to hear much in the way of plot details, but as a big fan of the original film, Kaling is very much looking forward to revisiting an older and wiser, and likely even more fabulous, Elle Woods. "I can't wait to see what people will think of the way we wrote Elle Woods at 40, said Kaling in an interview with Access Hollywood. How Elle Woods is at 40 versus how she was at 21 has been really fun to imagine. But for those who worry that Elle may have outgrown the bend and snap, never fear. Bend and snap is forever, Kaling reassured fans. We definitely have a lot of fan favorites from the original movie. Legally Blonde 3, is expected to arrive in May 2022. Lightyear. While the main Toy Story franchise appears to be pretty tightly wrapped up by the end of Toy Story 4, that doesn't mean there are no stories left to be told inside the uplifting Pixar world. Disney announced during their 2020 Investor Day event that everyone's favorite space ranger, Buzz Lightyear, would be getting his own feature film, which will arrive in theaters June 17, 2022. But before you assume you know what to expect from a Buzz Lightyear movie, you should know that Lightyear won't be a typical spin-off. Instead of following the Tim Allen-voiced character from the Toy Story films, Lightyear will follow a different Buzz Lightyear, voiced by MCU star Chris Evans. After Pixar tweeted that Lightyear would be the definitive story of the original Buzz Lightyear, Evans followed their announcement up with a perplexing clarification of his own. And just to be clear, this isn't Buzz Lightyear the toy. This is the origin story of the human Buzz Lightyear that the toy is based on. As best we can tell, this means that Lightyear will follow a human character, or possibly a live-action, fictional character, within the Toy Story universe whose adventures eventually lead to him getting a line of toys based on his life and/or show, movie. Confused yet? So are we. Indiana Jones 5. As part of Disney's whirlwind of announcements during their 2020 Investor Day event, the studio reaffirmed that a fifth installment in the iconic Indiana Jones franchise is on the way and will once again star Indy himself, Harrison Ford. At 78 years old, Ford will likely be retiring his trademark whip and fedora by the end of Indiana Jones 5, although the studio hasn't yet indicated whether the film will see him pass the baton to a younger generation, as was the fumbled intent of 2008's much-maligned Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, or close out the franchise. However, we do know he'll be joined in his adventure by Phoebe Waller-Bridge of Fleabag, Mads Mikkelsen of Hannibal, and Oscar nominee Antonio Banderas, along with Boyd Holbrook and Shawnette Renee Wilson. And they'll be accompanied by the score of John Williams, who's returning for Indy's newest adventure. In the director's chair for Indiana Jones 5 is James Mangold, who already knows what it's like to bring the legacy of a beloved action hero to a dignified end. Mangold previously directed 2017's Logan, which served as the final adventure for Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and Patrick Stewart's Charles Xavier, characters they'd both been playing in numerous films since 2000's X-Men. Logan earned Mangold an Academy Award nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay and served as a thrilling and satisfying conclusion for Jackman and Stewart's characters. While Indiana Jones 5 inches isn't likely to skew nearly as dark as Logan, we can only hope that its farewell to the adventurous archaeology professor will be as moving when the film hits theaters on July 29, 2022. Puss in Boots 2 audiences were first introduced to the character of Puss in Boots in 2004's Shrek 2, where the ferocious feline was hired as an assassin to take out the titular ogre. Of course, he never managed to carry out his mission, and the film ended with the two characters on the same side. Voiced by Antonio Banderas, Universal deemed the character of Puss in Boots popular enough to warrant his own spin-off, which was released in 2011. Set before the events of Shrek 2, Puss in Boots fleshed out the character's origin story, and it went on to earn an Oscar nomination for Best Animated Feature. In 2019, it was announced that Puss in Boots would be getting a sequel helmed by Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse co-director Bob Persichetti. However, in 2021, Universal announced that Persichetti had been replaced by Joel Crawford, who most recently directed The Croods: A New Age. The sequel will be called Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and it will follow the courageous kitty, now on his 9th life, as he searches for the mythical last wish that he hopes will restore the other 8. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is set to release on September 23, 2022. Creed 3. After 6 Rocky movies and 2 Creed films, MGM may finally be making a Rocky movie without Rocky. Although the studio has hired writer Zach Balan to pen a third Creed film, Sylvester Stallone went on the record after Creed 2, claiming that he was done playing Rocky Balboa for good. Granted, there's still plenty of story to explore even without Rocky, with Michael B. Jordan's character Adonis Creed ending the second movie not only a victor in the boxing ring, but also a father of a baby girl with his fiancée, Bianca Tessa Thompson. We don't know a whole lot about the plot of the third Creed film. However, we do know that in addition to starring in the film, Jordan will be making his directorial debut with Creed 3, saying in a statement, "This franchise, and in particular the themes of Creed 3, are deeply personal to me. I look forward to sharing the next chapter of Adonis Creed's story with the awesome responsibility of being its director and namesake." On top of that, we also know who will most likely be showing up on the other side of the squared circle. Deadline announced in June 2021 that Jonathan Majors is in talks to lace on the gloves and trade blows with Adonis. Majors skyrocketed to fame after playing the lead of HBO's Lovecraft Country. And in addition to work in films like Da 5 Bloods and The Last Black Man in San Francisco, Majors has been cast in Netflix's upcoming western, The Harder They Fall, and he's also He Who Remains, Kong the Conqueror in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Will Majors' character have any connection to previous Rocky films? It's a legit question to ask, as the villain of Creed II was the son of Ivan Drago, Dolph Lundgren, the villain from Rocky IV. We don't know at the moment, but we really hope to see Majors and Jordan go toe-to-toe on November 23, 2022. 4 Avatar sequels. James Cameron has been talking about Avatar sequels almost from the moment the first film exploded onto screens in 2009, smashing box office records and eventually becoming the highest-grossing film of all time, a title it's since contested with Avengers: Endgame. However, despite years of Cameron's repeated promises, which ballooned over time from a modest 2 Avatar sequels to a whopping 4 sequels, it was beginning to feel as though a follow-up was as far off and unreachable as the fictional moon of Pandora. But believe it or not, 4 more Avatars really do appear to be imminent. In fact, according to Sigourney Weaver, the first 2 have already finished shooting. They've even got titles: Avatar: The Way of Water, Avatar: The Seedbearer, Avatar: The Tulkun Rider, and Avatar: The Quest for Awa. What does it all mean? No one knows but James Cameron and his eclectic cast, which, in addition to original Avatar, stars Weaver, Zoe Saldana, and Sam Worthington, also includes newcomers Edie Falco, Kate Winslet, Michelle Yeoh, Jermaine Clement, and Vin Diesel. The rest of us will have to wait a while to find out. Avatar: The Way of Water is scheduled for release on December 17, 2022, with Avatar: The Seedbearer arriving on December 22, 2024, Avatar: The Tulkun Rider following on December 19, 2026, and Avatar: The Quest for Awa concluding the franchise on December 17, 2028. Mad Max 5 and Furiosa. In 2015, Mad Max: Fury Road reinvigorated the long-dormant Mad Max franchise, which began in 1979 with Mel Gibson in the title role. Fury Road offered a new spin on the post-apocalyptic tale, casting Tom Hardy as Max and shifting focus to Charlize Theron's rage-fueled Imperator Furiosa. Mad Max: Fury Road wowed audiences and critics alike, with many considering it one of the best action films of all time, so it seemed that sequels would be inevitable. Sure enough, 5 years after Fury Road roared into theaters, 2 follow-up films are in the works, one of which is a direct sequel, while the other is a prequel centered around a younger Furiosa. The sequel, which has been given the working title, Mad Max: The Wasteland, was reportedly greenlit by Warner Brothers in early 2020, and will follow Hardy's Max Rokitansky but won't feature the return of Furiosa. And while Furiosa will bring back the title character, Theron herself won't be making an appearance in that film either. Director George Miller said that much as he loved Theron's performance in Fury Road, he doesn't have enough faith into aging technology to allow Theron to reprise her role for the prequel. Instead, the younger Furiosa will be played by Anya Taylor-Joy, who will be joined by MCU star Chris Hemsworth and Emmy-winning Watchmen actor Yahya Abdul-Mateen too. Miller hasn't yet revealed who Hemsworth and Abdul-Mateen will be playing in Furiosa, but the characters have likely existed in the director's head since before the previous film, since he and co-writer Nick Lathouris developed origin stories for every character while prepping Fury Road, and in fact wrote an entire screenplay for Furiosa in the process. Furiosa will be tearing into theaters on June 23, 2023. Knives Out 2 and 3. Although 2019's wildly fun whodunit Knives Out was written in a pretty self-contained way, telling the story of the affluent Thrombey family and how they dealt with the mysterious death of their patriarch Harlan Thrombey, Christopher Plummer, director Rian Johnson wasted no time in letting audiences know that he'd be open to a sequel, telling Collider, "If this movie does even okay, I will in a heartbeat make more of these with Daniel." As it turned out, Knives Out did a lot better than okay, bringing in more than $300 million worldwide and justifying not 1 but 2 sequels, which will go directly to Netflix. The move to Netflix is a surprising one, considering that the first film was distributed theatrically through Lionsgate, but it was Johnson's call, along with his producing partner, Ram Bergman, to take the sequels directly to the streaming site. Both films will follow Daniel Craig's drawling private investigator, Benoit Blanc, but he'll be the only carryover from the first movie. Aside from Craig, Johnson says that Knives Out sequels will each feature a different cast, different setting, and a different donut-shaped mystery for Blanc to solve, similar to Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot novels, which served as an inspiration for Knives Out. While no release date has been set for either Knives Out sequel, the ensemble cast is shaping up to be every bit as impressive as that of the first film, with Kathryn Hahn, Dave Bautista, Janelle Monáe, Leslie Odom Jr., Edward Norton, Kate Hudson, Jessica Henwick, Madeline Klein, Ethan Hawke, and Jada Pinkett Smith all signing on to appear in the second film, playing characters that, according to Bautista, are even more quirky than the characters in the first one. Bautista also boldly stated that he believes Knives Out 2 will be as good, if not better, than the first one, and that people are really going to dig this. Attack the Block 2. Before John Boyega was known for fighting intergalactic space battles in Star Wars, he was fighting unsettling monstrous aliens in the urban sci-fi adventure, Attack the Block. Written and directed by Joe Cornish, the 2011 film starred Boyega as Moses, the leader of a teenage street gang in South London. A gang that decides to rid their neighborhood of vicious extraterrestrials after they unexpectedly start falling from the sky. The sequel will reunite Boyega and Cornish, who's once again both writing and directing. This time, Boyega will also be acting as co-producer, in addition to reprising his role as Moses. Speaking to Deadline, Boyega said, "It's been a decade since Attack the Block was released, and so much has changed since then. I'm excited to see this heightened story return to the streets of London. Moses has remained one of my favorite characters to play, and bringing him back is a huge honor." Cornish echoed his enthusiasm, saying, "I'm thrilled we're officially announcing our return to the world of Attack the Block on the 10th anniversary of the film's release. I can't wait to work alongside John again, bringing audiences an even bigger slice of inner-city alien action." No further details have been revealed about the film, including the plot, other returning cast members, or a release date, but if Cornish and Boyega are excited, so are we. Searching 2. In 2018, Searching offered audiences a tight, tense thriller about a desperate father frantically trying to locate his missing daughter, told entirely through screens.
Using phones, computer monitors, and televisions, Searching managed to weave the everyday technology used by its main characters into its central narrative, turning what could have been an eye-rolling gimmick into a compelling storytelling device. However, the mystery told in Searching felt pretty definitively concluded by the end of the film, which makes the idea of a sequel somewhat surprising. And yet that's what we're getting, with Deadline reporting in August of 2019 that Searching 2 is in the works. It will mark the directorial debut of Will Merrick and Nick Johnson, who edited the original film and will also be penning Part 2. But before you worry that making a sequel to the innovative thriller, whose plot relied heavily on chance, pushes the boundaries of plausibility, rest assured that this follow-up won't be hurling John Cho's David Kim into an improbable scenario. Searching 2 will feature a new mystery featuring an entirely new cast of characters. In response to the sequel news on Twitter, producer Anish Chaganty wrote, "It's true. But note, the story will not follow the same characters or plotline as the first. Most importantly, we see this as an opportunity to tell another original, tech-driven thriller." While there's still no word on when we can expect to see Searching 2, or what its plot will be, Euphoria, and A Wrinkle in Time, star Storm Reid will play the lead in the tech-driven sequel, and she'll be accompanied by the likes of Nia Long, Ken Leung, Joaquim de Almeida, and Amy Landecker, among others. Paranormal Activity 7. After 6 successful installments in the found-footage horror franchise, Paranormal Activity is coming back with a 7th film, which will once again partner Paramount Studios with horror mega-producer Jason Blum. The film will be helmed by Underwater director Will Eubank from a script by Happy Death Day scribe Christopher Landon, and after a bit of shuffling due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the decision was made to skip theaters and release the film directly onto Paramount+. The film will star Emily Bader, Roland Buck III, Dan Lippert and Henry Ayers Brown. While no plot details have yet been released, producer Jason Blum told Collider that rather than another sequel or prequel, the 7th, Paranormal Activity, film will completely reboot the series. "It was tired, there was no way to continue the road that we'd been down," Blum said. "I thought if you were going to redo it, you better really redo it, not try and expand what we did all those years ago." The first, Paranormal Activity, focused on newlyweds Katie Featherston, and Micah Sloat. Every subsequent installment has tied back to Katie and her family in one way or another as the characters encounter her demonic companion, Toby. However, based on Bloom's statement, it sounds as though Paranormal Activity 7 Inches may not tie back to Katie's story at all and possibly won't feature Toby either. That said, keeping with the style of the first 6 films, we still anticipate the 7th, Paranormal Activity, to be presented as found footage recorded via security cameras, mobile devices, and other household recording equipment. Filming on Paranormal Activity 7 is complete, and the film is expected to hit Paramount Plus before the end of 2021. Extraction 2. While the coronavirus pandemic sent the rest of the movie industry into a tailspin in 2020, streaming giant Netflix embraced the opportunity to deliver new movies to its homebound audience with gusto, rolling out a number of big-budget films headlined by A-list stars. Chief among them was the action thriller, Extraction, starring the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Chris Hemsworth, which quickly established itself as the most watched original film in Netflix's history, making a sequel practically inevitable. Sure enough, less than 2 weeks after Extraction premiered on the streamer, Deadline reported that a sequel is already in the works. Avengers: Infinity War, and Avengers: Endgame, director Joe Russo is once again on board to write the script, and Sam Hargrave will be returning to direct. Chris Hemsworth will also be returning, and filming is set to begin sometime in late 2021. As for the plot, Russo sounds like he's tapping into his MCU experience and planning out an entire Extraction cinematic universe, saying at his CCXP panel, "We are working at building out a universe of films that could potentially explore some of the other characters from the first movie and some new characters and see more historical interaction between the characters." In a previous interview, Russo elaborated on this position, telling Collider, "We're trying to find more interesting ways to tell these stories and cross-pollinate them."
Can we go backwards and forwards at the same time? Can things that happened in the past affect the movies in the present? More interesting still, Russo went on to ask, can we see different points of view? Every antagonist is the protagonist in their own story, so can we see their point of view? I think what makes that a compelling element to the Extraction universe is it is a global franchise telling global stories, and we'd like to diversify the point of view in those movies. As for who would helm these hypothetical future installments of the franchise, Hargrave said that he's willing to step aside after the second one to allow for some fresh perspectives. There's a lot of other super talented filmmakers out there who would have very unique visions and would bring something new and fresh to the franchise that I would be excited to see as a fan, Hargrave told Collider, adding, I would love to see, as a fan of cinema, other young directors who, again, can push the level of action. Enola Holmes 2. The game is afoot, again. After the smash success of 2020's Enola Holmes, Netflix's detective yacht caper starring Millie Bobby Brown as the younger sister of Sherlock Holmes, Henry Cavill. The streamer has greenlit a sequel that will bring back both Holmes siblings for another twisting caper. Based on a series of novels by Nancy Springer, the first film saw teenage Enola running away from home to investigate her mother's, Helena Bonham Carter, mysterious disappearance, against the explicit instructions of her older brother, Mycroft, Sam Claflin, who steps in as her guardian. During her journey, she befriends the Viscount Tewkesbury, Marquis of Basilweather, Louis Partridge, a young runaway who's been targeted for assassination. Of course, by the end of the film, Enola has solved both mysteries, as well as earned the respect of her famous detective sibling. While the plot of the sequel isn't yet known, it will undoubtedly see Enola taking on another mysterious case, although whether she and Sherlock will work together this time or if Enola will venture out entirely on her own again remains to be seen. Brown and Cavill will both reprise their roles for the sequel, which will also bring back director Harry Bradbeer and writer Jack Thorne. Hocus Pocus 2. While Hocus Pocus failed to make much of a splash when it was first released in 1993, it has since gathered a significant following as a Halloween staple, with new fans discovering the witchy joys of the Sanderson sisters each year. The film follows a group of kids who accidentally resurrect the trio of sisters on Halloween, 300 years after their execution in 1693. The sisters then set about to suck away the souls of every child in Salem so that they can stay alive, unless the children who resurrected them, alongside an enchanted cat, can stop them. While details on the sequel film remain scarce, original Hocus Pocus stars Bette Midler, Kathy Najimy, and Sarah Jessica Parker are set to return in the sequel, which will bow on Disney+. Working from a script by Jen D'Angelo, Hocus Pocus 2 was originally set to be directed by Adam Shankman, but he was replaced in 2021 by Anne Fletcher. And Bloody Disgusting revealed the official plot synopsis for the film, which reads, 3 young women accidentally bring the Sanderson sisters back to modern-day Salem and must figure out how to stop the child-hungry witches from wreaking a new kind of havoc on the world. Tomb Raider 2 After 2, Tomb Raider, film starring Angelina Jolie in 2001 and 2003. The franchise was rebooted in 2018 with Alicia Vikander in the lead role. Now, that new franchise is also getting a sequel, which was previously set to release March 19, 2021 but was then delayed indefinitely due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Vikander is set to reprise her role as Lara Croft, but after originally tapping Ben Wheatley in 2019 to direct from a script penned by his wife and frequent collaborator, Amy Jump, the studio pivoted in early 2021 to announce that Tomb Raider 2 will be written and directed by Lovecraft Country showrunner Misha Green. Adapted from the popular Tomb Raider video game series, the first film follows adventurous archaeologist Lara Croft as she journeys into perilous locations in search of her missing father. Although little is known about the plot of the sequel, the first film set up one possible storyline with its reveal that her father's former business partner, Anna Miller, Kristen Scott Thomas, heads up the very company that was set to release the world-ending virus that Croft prevented. The door is wide open for Thomas to return for the sequel, stepping more fully into the role of villain than she did in the first film. Disenchanted in 2007, Disney captivated audiences with Enchanted, a princess story with a twist. The animated princess Giselle, Amy Adams, accidentally tumbles into real-world, live-action New York City.
Although Giselle eventually found her happy ending with single dad Robert, Patrick Dempsey, that didn't stop talk of a sequel from spinning soon after the film's release. While the sequel, titled Disenchanted, was slow getting off the ground, the production is now full steam ahead, and will be premiering exclusively on Disney+. In 2016, Hairspray director Adam Shankman was brought on board to direct Disenchanted, and he confirmed in 2019 that he's still attached to the production and ready to go. According to Disney, the story will pick up 15 years after the first film, following Giselle as she moves to the suburbs with Robert and his daughter, Morgan, where she must juggle the challenges that come with a new home and discover what happily ever after truly means to her and her new family. Composer Alan Menken is also on board for the sequel, along with lyricist Stephen Schwartz. As for the cast, Enchanted, stars Amy Adams and Patrick Dempsey will be returning for the sequel, along with co-stars Idina Menzel and James Marsden, who got married in the cartoon Kingdom of Andalasia at the end of Enchanted. Considering the Tony Award-winning Menzel never got to belt out a musical number in the first film, it seems only right that she should get a chance to showcase her impressive pipes in the sequel. Joining the original cast will be Yvette Nicole Brown, Jayma Mays, and Maya Rudolph. Rudolph, at least, will be playing a villain, with the potential of all 3 serving as antagonists. The Lion King 2. After the massive commercial success of Disney's photo-realistic remake of The Lion King, it seemed like only a matter of time until a sequel was announced. However, the person taking over the directorial reins from Jon Favreau for The Lion King 2 is probably not a name most people would have expected to hear. Barry Jenkins, the Academy Award-winning writer and director best known for making poignant dramas with strong racial themes, including Moonlight and If Beale Street Could Talk. Jenkins won't be writing The Lion King 2, but he'll instead be working from a script by Jeff Nathanson, who also penned the first Lion King. While no specific details of the plot have been revealed, we know that The Lion King 2 will be a prequel to the first film, following Mufasa, played by Aaron Pierre of The Underground Railroad, and Scar in their younger years. It will also introduce a number of new characters, who are reportedly named Ada, Horatio, Elijah, Celia, Caliban, Cardi, Zola, and someone named Taka, voiced by Kelvin Harrison Jr. The Trial of the Chicago 7. However, no further information has been provided about these characters, including what types of animals they are or whose side they might be on. Although The Lion King 2 seems like an outlier in Jenkins' filmography, the director sounds excited about working on the sequel for Disney, saying, "Having the opportunity to work with Disney on expanding this magnificent tale of friendship, love and legacy while furthering my work chronicling the lives and souls of folk within the African diaspora is a dream come true." Insidious 5. The long-running Insidious franchise is getting a 5th installment. And this time, franchise star Patrick Wilson will be settling into the director's chair. The first two films follow a couple whose young son is haunted by otherworldly beings and what happens when the family fights back, while the third and fourth are prequels that focus on the psychic who aided the heroes of the first two films. Insidious 5 Inches will follow the son from the original movie, now a decade older, as he heads off to college. I'm honored and thrilled to be at the helm of the next, Insidious, installment, which will provide an amazing chance to unpack everything the Lamberts went through a decade ago, as well as deal with the consequences of their choices, Wilson said in a statement regarding his directorial duties for Insidious 5. Directing the movie is both professionally and personally a full-circle moment for me, and I am extremely grateful to be entrusted in continuing to tell this frightening and haunting story. Into the further we go. The further refers to the demonic realm that houses the entities which haunt the characters in the Insidious films. The script for Insidious 5 Inches was penned by Scott Teems and based on a story by Lee Whannell, who wrote the first 4 Insidious films. Cloverfield 4, even after a lackluster third film, which fumbled its surprise post-Super Bowl launch in 2018, the Cloverfield franchise apparently still has enough goodwill and potential to earn itself yet another follow-up. A fourth, Cloverfield film was announced in January 2021 from producer J.J. Abrams, who's hired Jiri Haji creator Joe Barton to pen the script. Although the first Cloverfield was filmed as a found footage story, following a group of young people in New York City fleeing an extraterrestrial monster attack, subsequent Cloverfield films have abandoned the found footage device, and the fourth film will be no exception. Thus far, each Cloverfield movie has been relatively self-contained, each following a different cast of characters in a totally different type of storyline, all within the same universe. The first film was a more straightforward urban monster film, while the second was a claustrophobic psychological thriller, and the third was sci-fi horror. There's no telling what the fourth film will look like, other than that it will almost certainly tie in the same monster invasion that has appeared in each of the Cloverfield films so far. However, unlike the second and third films, which were originally developed as standalone features and then retrofitted into the Cloverfield universe, the fourth, Cloverfield, will be the first sequel designed with the franchise in mind, meaning the ties to the rest of the franchise could be much more pronounced this time around. The Meg 2 When The Meg swam into the public consciousness, some might have scoffed at this ridiculous-sounding, Jaws, ripoff. But this Megalodon movie earned some serious coin at the box office, drawing $528 million worldwide against its $130 million budget. After all, this is a movie where Jason Statham goes to war with gigantic shark. Who doesn't want to see that? After audiences went into a feeding frenzy for the film, plans were almost immediately set in motion for a sequel. In October 2020, Warner Bros. Confirmed that Rebecca and High Rise filmmaker Ben Wheatley will be helming the Shark-tastic sequel. We don't really know what the plot will be, but since The Meg is actually based on a series of books by Steve Alten, the sequel might draw on the next novel, which involves an even bigger shark, as well as the giant, crocodile-like Kronosaurus. The latest script for The Meg 2 was written by John and Eric Hober working off a draft by Dean Georgeris, all of whom shared writing credit on the first film. And filming for this crazy sequel starts in January 2022. Jump Street. Now for her pleasure. Although producer Phil Lord has said that the team behind the Jump Street movies is putting a pin in 23 Jump Street, which would mark the third outing for 21 and 22 Jump Street, stars Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill, the studio is moving forward with a spin-off of the comedy franchise, this time focusing on a female duo. The first two, Jump Street, films followed a pair of male cops who went undercover at educational institutions, high school in 21, college in 22, in order to ferret out elusive drug suppliers. Presumably, the plot of Jump Street, Now for Her Pleasure, would be much in the same vein, and it would exist in the same universe as the existing Jump Street films, functioning as a continuation of the story started by officers Morton Schmidt and Greg Jenko in the first movie. This time, the stars at the center of the Jump Street tale will reportedly be Tiffany Haddish and Zendaya, whom we assume will both be playing undercover narcotics officers, similar to Tatum and Hill's characters in the first two movies. After directing the first two, Jump Street, films, Chris Miller and Phil Lord will be stepping aside for this third outing, and Rodney Rothman is coming aboard to helm the Jump Street spin-off, collaborating on the script with Bob's Burgers writers Lizzie and Wendy Molyneux. Rothman previously helped write the screenplay for 22 Jump Street, and co-directed Lord and Miller's acclaimed animated film, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. No word yet on what the plot will entail or whether Schmidt or Jenko will make an appearance. Face Off 2. As bizarre action movie premises go, it doesn't get much weirder than the original, Face Off, which starred Nicolas Cage and John Travolta as a terrorist and an FBI agent, respectively, who literally swap faces via a gnarly surgery in order to each take the other's place. Yet even though, spoiler alert, Cage's villainous Castor Troy is killed at the end of the first film, a direct sequel is now in the works from filmmakers Adam Wingard and Simon Barrett. While original reports assumed that the new Face Off film would be a reboot with a totally new cast taking on the story, Barrett and Wingard were quick to clarify on social media that they had no intention of reimagining the original, which Wingard wrote was a perfect action movie. Wingard and Barrett have previously worked together on pulse-pounding films such as You're Next and The Guest, suggesting they're more than capable of taking on the violently wacky tone of a Face Off sequel. Speaking to the Associated Press, Cage expressed enthusiasm at the possibility of reprising his role for the sequel, saying, "I would love to get back into that character and to work with Travolta," adding that the first film was such a fun movie to make. Of course, with Troy dead at the end of the first film, bringing back the original stars could be tricky. But on the other hand, there's no rule that either Cage or Travolta would have to play their original characters in order to return, especially in a film all about people wearing faces that don't belong to them. Pet Sematary 2. Although the Stephen King novel, Pet Sematary, ends pretty definitively, the same cannot be said for the 2019 film adaptation, which reimagined the ending to be a lot more open-ended. So it makes sense that Pet Sematary 2 is now in the works from Paramount, which will be helmed by Chaos Walking scribe Lindsay Beer and will also be her directing debut. The film is set to skip theaters, debuting exclusively on the Paramount Plus streaming service. The 2019 film starred Jason Clarke and Amy Seimetz as parents who discover a small cemetery, with a misspelled sign reading, Pet Sematary, hence the title, near their new house. After their cat is hit by a car and killed, they bury him in the cemetery, only for him to shockingly come back to life. Of course, everything goes downhill from there when one of their young children is accidentally killed, presenting the couple with a horrifying decision. The second, Pet Sematary, film will be a prequel, providing an origin story for the supernatural cemetery. The cast will include Jackson White, Forrest Goodluck, Jack Mulhern, Natalie Allen Lind, Isabella Starr LeBlanc, and the legendary Pam Grier. As for White, he'll be playing a younger version of Judd Crandall, the ill-fated character who was portrayed by John Lithgow in the 2019 film. Book Club 2. It probably should have been a foregone conclusion that a film about a group of friends reading a series of books would likely receive a sequel itself. The first, Book Club, followed characters played by Diane Keaton, Jane Fonda, Candice Bergen, and Mary Steenburgen, who decide to read the erotic novel, 50 Shades of Grey, for their monthly book club, and wind up changing their approach to their own personal relationships as a result. The film was a big hit at the box office, making back its modest budget many times over, which according to Steenburgen, left them with no choice but to make a sequel. "I guess we're doing Book Club 2, because the film was incredibly successful," Steenburgen said. "It made so much money. No other details are known about this apparently inevitable sequel, including who would be returning, although Keaton, Fonda, Bergen, and Steenburgen are likely a given, who would direct, when to expect it, and what the plot will be. However, while the genre could possibly differ from 50 Shades of Grey, it seems safe to assume that the second, Book Club, will at least center around another well-known book that will upend its readers' lives in unexpected and entertaining ways. Sherlock Holmes 3. Although rumor has it that a third, Sherlock Holmes, film starring Robert Downey Jr. has always been part of the Warner Brothers plan, the actor has spent the past decade anchoring the Marvel Cinematic Universe as the genius billionaire playboy philanthropist Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. Saving the world every couple years is a draining gig, and Downey's superhero commitments kept him from being able to take on the detective role for a third time. However, now that Downey has finally exited the MCU for good, save, perhaps, for an encore appearance in Black Widow, he finally has time to team up with Watson, Jude Law, also expected to return, and solve one more case. The third, Sherlock Holmes, film will be helmed by Rocketman director Dexter Fletcher, a departure from the first two films, which were both directed by Guy Ritchie. The script comes from Narcos creator Chris Brancato, with Susan Downey, Joel Silver, Dan Lin, and Lionel Wigram producing. While Sherlock Holmes 3 Inches was originally scheduled to release on Christmas Day, 2020, it's since been delayed due to the uncertainty caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. After having its theatrical release bumped from 2020 to December 21, 2021, Fletcher remarked in the fall of 2020 that the sequel is, sort of sitting on the back burner at the moment until it becomes clear where the world is at and what's going to happen, indicating that the long-awaited, Sherlock Holmes, threequel may not hit its 2021 date, either. Labyrinth II Jim Henson's cult classic fantasy, Labyrinth, has a die-hard following thanks to its fantastical and creepy storytelling, Henson's imaginative creature creations, and of course, an iconic performance from David Bowie as Jareth the Goblin King. Making a sequel to Henson's final feature film seems like a pretty intimidating task, but the Jim Henson Company feels up to the task. News of the Labyrinth sequel first broke in 2017, with Don't Breathe filmmaker Fede Alvarez attached to direct. However, Alvarez announced in April of 2020 that he decided to step away from the film, telling Bloody Disgusting, "I just decided I didn't want to do things as a director that people knew already what it was. Or have a preconceived notion of how it should look on the screen. So, Labyrinth would be something that people would judge that way, so I decided not to do it." The project didn't stay rudderless for long, though. In May of 2020, Deadline reported that Doctor Strange director Scott Derrickson has stepped in to helm the highly anticipated sequel. Maggie Levin, the writer and director of Into the Dark, will be writing the screenplay. While we don't yet have any details on the story that will bring us back into the world of Labyrinth, back when Alvarez was attached to direct, Project insiders confirmed to THR that the sequel would indeed be a continuation of the story that began in the original film, but that the character of the Goblin King would not be making an appearance. National Treasure 3 Some films get theatrical or streaming sequels while others get turned into TV series, but if you're the Nicolas Cage treasure hunting film, National Treasure, you get both. The long-awaited threequel to 2004's National Treasure, and 2007's National Treasure, Book of Secrets, seems to finally be moving forward at Disney, tapping Bad Boys 4 Inches scribe Chris Bremner to write the script. But that's not all. National Treasure will also find new life as a Disney Plus TV series, which producer Jerry Bruckheimer says is currently in the development process. While the TV series will feature the same concept but a young cast, National Treasure 3 is expected to reunite the cast from the first two films, presumably including Diane Kruger, Justin Bartha, and of course, Cage as protagonist Benjamin Franklin Gates. Also expected to return is director John Turteltaub, who helmed both of the first two films. Although Bruckheimer says the Disney Plus series is currently further along in the development pipeline, he's hopeful that both projects will ultimately come to fruition, delivering a veritable treasure trove of new National Treasure adventures. Atomic Blonde 2 fans of Charlize Theron in action roles are in for a treat. The Mad Max, Fury Road, and The Old Guard star will soon be slipping back into the platinum wigs of Lorraine Broughton, her enigmatic character from Atomic Blonde. Theron told The Hollywood Reporter in an interview in July of 2020 that an Atomic Blonde sequel was in active development, and that the lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic was actually helping move the process along, giving Theron and the writers more time to work on the script over Zoom. Theron elaborated in an interview with Total Film that Atomic Blonde 2 would likely be headed to Netflix this time around, the home of the actress' 2020 smash action hit, The Old Guard. Lorraine Broughton was set up in a way where she didn't really reveal much of herself, Theron said, speaking of her character's journey in the first film. So I feel like there's a lot of potential there. The bar's pretty high, but we're excited about it. Also starring John Goodman, James McAvoy, and Sofia Boutella, the first film found Theron's ruthless MI6 agent investigating a murder and dodging double crosses coming from every angle in Cold War-era Berlin. Atomic Blonde director David Leitch isn't sure whether he'll be involved with the sequel, but sounds as though he'd be game if asked to return. No details have yet been revealed about the plot of Atomic Blonde 2, but if the first film is any indication, we expect another twisting spy caper with plenty of hard-hitting action. Paddington 3. If anyone would have predicted in the early 2010s that one of the most universally beloved and critically acclaimed franchises of the decade would center around a marmalade-loving CGI bear, people would have likely dismissed them as living in a fantasy world. Yet the two existing Paddington films managed to enrapture critics and audiences alike, with the second film still sitting at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes 2 years after its release. Viewers can't seem to get enough of the sweet-natured bear and his kind-hearted family, so it's only fitting that a third, Paddington, is on the way. However, while the first two, Paddington, films were helmed by director Paul King, the third will have to find its way without him. King will be staying on as executive producer and called directing the first two films, one of the great treats of my life, but he's decided to step away from the director's chair for Paddington 3, telling Empire magazine, "At some point, you just have to stop.
It might be time for somebody else to do a twist on it." Who that someone will be is still up in the air, although King did reveal that the script has already been written and keeps the door open for even more sequels. "It's not like Paddington dies at the end," King said of the possibility for future adventures. "He doesn't ascend into the sky on a rocket-powered marmalade jar." Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark 2. For anyone who spent their childhood staying up late at night reading the spine-tingling, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark short story collections by Alvin Schwartz and illustrator Stephen Gamble. The news that master horror filmmaker Guillermo del Toro was adapting some of those stories into a feature film was likely creepy music to their ears. The Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark film, which was created from a screen story co-written by del Toro, Patrick Melton, and Marcus Dunstan and directed by André Ovredal, arrived in 2019, weaving a number of the chilling short stories from the books into a single narrative. The film was a success, receiving mostly positive reviews and performing respectably at the box office. In April 2020, a sequel was officially announced, which would reunite Ovredal, del Toro, and brothers Dan and Kevin Hageman, who contributed to the final script for the first film. Set in 1968, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark followed a group of teens who were horrified to realize that the terrifying stories written in a book they found are becoming a reality. Of the sequel, Ovredal told Collider, "I do think that we'll tap even more into illustrator Stephen Gamble's visual world in the sequel than we did in the first movie," referring to the iconically creepy illustrations included in the books. Once again, del Toro will be crafting the story for the second film, although he hasn't revealed yet whether Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark 2 will continue the story that began in the first film, which left the door wide open for a sequel, or if it will follow brand new characters and events unrelated to the first film. After prequel and sequel based on the YA novels by Anna Todd, 2019's After is a romantic college drama starring Josephine Langford and Hero finds Tiffin as Tessa and Hardin, who begin a tumultuous relationship during Tessa's freshman year of college. The film already has one sequel, 2020's After We Collided, with two more in the works, After We Fell, and After Ever Happy, which are being filmed back-to-back. Yet before either of those films have even hit theaters or streamers, two more After films are already being made, although unlike the other four, Tessa and Hardin's romance won't be at the core of either of them. Rather, the After prequel will follow a teenage Hardin through his experience with his first love, before he meets Tessa in After. Then the sequel will pick up with Tessa and Hardin's teenage kids, as they go through their own young adult drama. Both new After films will be written and directed by Castile Landon, who also directed the third and fourth films. Seeing After We Fell and After Ever Happy come together in the edit has inspired us to continue expanding the universe, exploring the origins of the characters we already know and love and giving life to the next generation, Landon said. "I'm excited to have the opportunity to broaden the relatable themes already established in the series and introduce Hardin and Tessa's teenage children to a modern landscape." Both films are set to release theatrically on September 1, 2021 in international markets, with a U.S. theatrical release following sometime in October. In the UK and France, however, both films will be launching directly on Amazon Prime Video. Sister Act 3 in an act of divine providence, or just Hollywood nostalgia. It looks like Sister Mary Clarence will be donning her habit once again. Whoopi Goldberg announced on The Late Late Show with James Corden that Sister Act 3 is finally in the works, after years of being told that there was no interest in a threequel. The film, which will premiere on Disney+, was confirmed by Disney at their 2020 Investor Day event. Goldberg will indeed be returning as both star and producer, with Tyler Perry also coming on board to produce and Madhuri Shakar signing on to pen the script. Released in 1992, the first Sister Act saw Goldberg play Dolores Van Cartier, a lounge singer who goes into witness protection at a convent after witnessing a murder. There, in the guise of a nun named Sister Mary Clarence, Dolores transforms the convent's humdrum choir into an upbeat musical sensation. Sister Act got a sequel in 1993 with Sister Act 2, Back in the Habit, which found Dolores stepping in as a music teacher for a group of low-achieving students at a Catholic school. Once again, she turned the struggling music program around into a high-energy phenomenon. Goldberg suggested in her profile for Variety in 2021 that we could even possibly see some of those kids again. Maybe there's gonna be some of the kids from Sister Act 2. Goldberg teased. Who can say? The first two Sister Act films also featured Maggie Smith, Kathy Najimy, and Wendy Makina. While there's no word yet on whether any of them will be reprising their roles for the third film, it's hard to imagine a new Sister Act movie without them. Goldberg seems to agree, telling Corden, "We're working diligently to try to figure out how to get the gang together and come back." Stargirl 2 following the mostly positive reception to 2020's Disney Plus original film, Stargirl. The studio has greenlit a sequel that will bring back much of the creative team from the first film, including Grace VanderWaal, who played Susan, Stargirl, Caraway, and director Julia Hart. Adapted from the 2000 novel by Jerry Spinelli, Stargirl follows a boy named Leo, Graham Verscheer, who's pulled out of his shell when he falls for a free-spirited girl at his school. The first film was a jukebox musical about first love and being true to yourself, but the sequel will feature original music written by Michael Penn and VanderWaal herself. In addition to VanderWaal, the Stargirl sequel will also star Elijah Richardson as Evan, Stargirl's new neighbor and an aspiring writer, who will also act as her love interest. Judy Greer will also appear in Stargirl 2 as Stargirl's mother, who'll be moving her daughter out of the town of Mica, Arizona, where the first film is set, to the bigger world of Los Angeles. Plus, Uma Thurman will play a singer who Stargirl admires, and names like Judd Hirsch, Al Madrigal, Sarah U. Blue, Chris Williams and Nija Okoro will also show up. The script will again be penned by Julia Hart and Jordan Horowitz, who co-wrote the Stargirl adaptation along with Kirsten Hahn. The announcement of Stargirl 2 makes Stargirl the first Disney Plus original feature film to earn itself a sequel, although we're guessing it will be far from the last. 47 Ronin sequel. When the Keanu Reeves starring samurai fantasy 47 Ronin hit theaters in 2013, it didn't exactly blow anyone away. Not only were the reviews largely negative, but it failed to earn back its $175 million budget, making it one of the biggest box office bombs of 2013. Between the lack of critical acclaim and the lack of commercial success, it wasn't the type of film that typically gets a sequel, yet in August 2020, we learned that a new 47 Ronin adventure is on deck at Universal 1440 Entertainment, the production arm of Universal Studios Home Entertainment, and will be headed straight to Netflix. The sequel will be directed by Ron Yuan, who stars as Sergeant Chang in Disney's live-action Mulan. Of the film, Yuan said, "I'm incredibly excited to be working with Universal and the producing team on this genre-blending, martial arts, action, horror and cyberpunk film. This will be a fun, intense, supercharged thrill ride for viewers globally." As for the screenplay, that'll be penned by Amy Garcia of Lucifer fame and AJ Mendez, a New York Times best-selling writer who's also known to WWE fans as wrestling superstar AJ Lee. In addition to Reeves, the original film starred Hiroyuki Sanada, Tadanobu Asano, Rinko Kikuchi and Ko Shibasaki. It told a fictionalized account of the real-life 47 Ronin, a group of 18th-century samurai who set out to avenge the death of their master. The film added a fantasy element to the story, setting the characters' quest in a world filled with magic, witches, and giants. There's no word yet on whether Reeves or the other stars of 47 Ronin will be returning for the sequel, which, based on Yuan's statement that the new film will be cyberpunk, sounds like it will be set in the far-flung future, instead of the distant past. The Exorcist sequel in our current age of sequels, remakes, and reboots of what can sometimes feel like every significant film ever made, revisiting one of the most iconic horror films of all time was all but inevitable. And sure enough, The Exorcist 2 Inches, and 3, and 4 are in the works from Fright Factory Blumhouse Productions. David Gordon Green, who most recently wrote and is in the process of directing the new Halloween trilogy for the studio, will helm the new trilogy, which will be penned by Green, Danny McBride, Scott Teems, and Peter Sattler. The original Exorcist centered a 12-year-old girl, played by Linda Blair, who was possessed by a terrifying demon. Her mother, Ellen Burstyn, hires two priests, played by Jason Miller and Max von Sydow, to perform an exorcism. Although, spoiler alert, both priests died in the original film, and Miller and von Sydow have both since passed on, Burstyn will be reprising her role, aiding new protagonist Leslie Odom Jr. as he searches for help with his own possessed child.
The first film in the new, The Exorcist trilogy will get a theatrical release on October 13, 2023, although there's a possibility that the following two films could premiere on the Peacock streaming platform. We Can Be Heroes 2. Not long after the Christmas Day premiere of the 2020 superhero film, We Can Be Heroes, on Netflix, the streamer announced that a sequel was already on the way. Featuring characters from both Spy Kids and The Adventures of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, We Can Be Heroes is a similar sort of family adventure film focusing on superpowered kids tasked with saving the day when the adults go missing. According to Netflix's own internal metrics, We Can Be Heroes was viewed by 44 million households during its first 4 weeks. With such impressive numbers, it's no surprise that writer and director Robert Rodriguez was already planning the sequel by January. Speaking to Collider about the possibility of a Part 2, Rodriguez said, "I've already got ideas in mind because we'd have to jump right into it." The tight timeline is referring to how quickly kids grow up, meaning that the sequel would need to move into production rapidly in order to keep its young stars relatively the same age. So while we don't have an official timeline for We Can Be Heroes 2 yet, rest assured that we won't be waiting long. G.I. Joe 3. Although a G.I. Go spin-off titled Snake Eyes, starring Henry Golding, was delayed from its intended 2020 release to July 23, 2021 due to the coronavirus pandemic, that hasn't stopped Paramount from moving forward with yet another G.I. Joe sequel. The next film in the G.I. Joe universe will be scripted by writers Joe Shrapnel and Anna Waterhouse, who most recently penned the Kristen Stewart political thriller, Seberg. In the film, Stewart starred as real-life actress Jean Seberg, who was targeted by the FBI COINTELPRO project in retaliation for her support of the Black Panther Party. While no plot or casting details for the third, G.I. Joe, film have been confirmed, back in 2018 it was reported that the title would be, G.I. Joe, Ever Vigilant, and that it would star Dwayne Johnson, reprising his role from G.I. Joe, Retaliation. Also rumored to be included in the third film were the characters Dana Janik, Dr. Adele Burkhart, Wild Bill, Barbecue, General Flag, Doc, and Keelhaul, with the main antagonists being Tomax and Zaymot. Of course, at the time that those details were announced, Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol, writers Josh Applebaum and Andre Nemec were also attached to write the script, which is no longer the case. With the script changing hands, it's very possible that none of the other previously announced details, including Johnson's involvement and the rumored character list, are still true. However, producer Lorenzo di Bonaventura assured EU in 2021 that G.I. Joe 3 inches was still in the works. "We want to get it right," Bonaventura said. "How fast? There's always a question, but no, there's absolutely a commitment from Paramount to get another Joe up and running." Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. After announcing that they'd be taking their successful Transformers franchise in a new direction in the wake of director Michael Bay's departure after finishing Transformers: The Last Knight, Paramount has chosen Stephen Caple Jr. to direct the next film in the Transformers universe, which will be titled Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. The film will bring back popular Autobots such as Optimus Prime and Bumblebee, while introducing several new to the film's Beast Wars characters such as Optimus Primal. And that Robo-Gorilla will be voiced by none other than Hellboy himself, Ron Perlman. Caple will be working from a script written by Joby Harold, who was also responsible for the screenplay for King Arthur: Legend of the Sword, and will be serving as a writer for the upcoming Obi-Wan Kenobi series at Disney+. Caple is best known for directing Creed II, starring Michael B. Jordan. Transformers 7 inches will star Hamilton and In the Heights actor Anthony Ramos, alongside Judas and the Black Messiah actor Dominique Fishback. Although Paramount hasn't yet revealed anything definitive about the plot for Transformers 7, producer Lorenzo di Bonaventura previously revealed that the studio wasn't interested in developing a direct sequel to The Last Knight, and that the next Transformers film wouldn't pick up where that one left off. Aladdin 2. Disney's live-action reimaginings of their animated classics have proven to be a home run at the box office, and the live-action Aladdin was no exception, bringing in over $1 billion globally. So it comes as no surprise that it's getting a sequel, although unlike the first film, this one likely won't be modeled directly off the animated version. The original animated Aladdin got a direct-to-video sequel in the form of 1994's The Return of Jafar. Few details are known about the Aladdin sequel, although stars Will Smith, Mina Massoud, and Naomi Scott are all expected to reprise their respective roles as the Genie, Aladdin, and Jasmine. Guy Ritchie is also expected to return to the director's chair, working off a script from John Gatins, Flight, and Andrea Berloff, Straight Outta Compton. As for the plot, it's still very much an unknown, although it's possible that the sequel could take the form of an adaptation of another folktale from 1001 Nights. Clerks 3 in early 2020. Most of the world's plans were upended by the rapidly spreading coronavirus pandemic, and Hollywood was no exception, with production on a number of films halting, theaters closing, and many completed films having their release dates pushed back by months or more. However, one of the few films to actually experience some forward movement as a direct result of the pandemic was the long-awaited Clerks 3. In a Facebook post, writer and director Kevin Smith wrote, "And now that everything has been cancelled for a month or two, I will have time to finish the Twilight of the Mallrats and Clerks 3 feat scripts. Hiking and writing. That's my pandemic plan." The original Clerks, released in 1994, followed a pair of clerks who worked at a combination video rental shop, convenience store, and took place in and around the store. The follow-up, 2006's Clerks 2, follows the same characters a decade later, after a fire at the Quick Stop has forced them to start working at a fast food restaurant. The third film will return to the Quick Stop and will follow Randall, Jeff Anderson, asking his friends to help him tell his life story by making an indie film after suffering a heart attack. In addition to Anderson, original franchise actors Brian O'Halloran, Jay Mewes, Rosario Dawson, and of course, Kevin Smith will all be reprising their roles. While Clerks 3 doesn't have a release date yet, the fact that the film is already in production indicates that it won't be too long before we see the Clerks crew reunited again. Mallrats 2. Twilight of the Mallrats along with Clerks 3, another Kevin Smith script that got polished up while social distancing in 2020, is the sequel to 1995's Mallrats, which he penned under the working title, Twilight of the Mallrats. The plot of the original film pivots around a dating game show being filmed at a shopping mall, and stars Jeremy London, Jason Lee, Claire Forlani, Shannon Doherty, Ben Affleck, and Michael Rooker. This time, instead of a game show, the plot will focus on some sort of convention taking place at the mall. According to Smith, the whole thing is, there's a big convention at the mall, so there's plenty of places and opportunities for things to happen. Of the original cast, while Shannon Doherty was the first actor confirmed to be returning, Smith has since revealed that the entire main cast of the first film will be appearing in the second. "Everybody comes back," he told comicbook.com. He even confirmed that iconic comic book creator Stan Lee, who passed away in 2018, will have a scene to parallel his cameo in the first movie. "The thing I feel most clever about in regard to the movie, obviously one of us can't come back, right? Stan's gone. So, there is a Stan Lee scene, and it makes absolute perfect sense," Smith said. "And when you see it, it'll *****ing break your heart and make you cry and while you're laughing. It is so like, I'm not saying I'm clever, but it's *****ing clever. And I get to pull it off without bringing in somebody that's not part of the family, so to speak. It's pretty damn wonderful." Joining them for Twilight of the Mallrats will be newcomer Aparna Brielle, whom Smith says will be at the center of the sequel, which he hopes to begin shooting soon. "I was so impressed with Brielle. I built my next flick around her," Smith tweeted. Aparna will play Lee's character, Brody Bruce's daughter Banner Bruce, in the movie I hope to shoot next, Twilight of the Mallrats. The Hunger Games prequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, after the runaway success of the Hunger Games series, which dominated the box office from 2012 to 2015 and moved more than 65 million books in the U.S. It seemed likely that audiences would one day get the opportunity to return to the dystopian world of Panem one way or another. Sure enough, in June of 2019, publisher Scholastic announced that it would be releasing another novel by Suzanne Collins set in the Hunger Games world, and The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes hit shelves on May 19, 2020. Set 64 years before the events of The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes follows an 18-year-old Coriolanus Snow, who would eventually grow up to become the ruthless ruler of Panem in Collin's original novels.
The story focuses on the 10th Hunger Games, for which Coriolanus is chosen to become a reluctant mentor to a girl from District 12, the same district which would eventually produce The Hunger Games, protagonist Katniss Everdeen. A film version of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was confirmed by Lionsgate prior to the book's release, to be directed by Hunger Games veteran Francis Lawrence. Lawrence previously directed the last 3 films in the 4-part Hunger Games franchise. The screenplay will be adapted by Catching Fire writer Michael Arndt, from a treatment by Suzanne Collins, who will also serve as an executive producer on the film. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is expected to start production in the first half of 2022, aiming for release sometime in late 2023 or early 2024. Bad Boys 4 before the third Bad Boys film, Bad Boys for Life, had even hit theaters in early 2020, Sony was already prepping the 4th installment. Bad Boys 4 Inches was announced in January of 2020 as a follow-up to the first 3 films in the hit buddy cop action franchise, which first kicked off in 1995 with the original, Bad Boys. Starring Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, Bad Boys follows 2 Miami detectives as they investigate a case of stolen heroin while protecting the witness to a murder. Bad Boys was successful enough to earn a sequel, Bad Boys 2, which came out in 2003. Bad Boys for Life catches up with detectives Lowry, Smith, and Burnett, Lawrence, 17 years later, as they investigate a string of murders with connections to Lowry's past. No plot details have yet been revealed about the 4th film, but the script is being penned by Chris Bremner, who also worked on Bad Boys for Life. While nothing is official yet, it's safe to assume that Smith and Lawrence would both return for Part 4, which will hopefully not take another 17 years to become a reality. Now You See Me 3 Abracadabra, another, Now You See Me, is in the works. The newest take on the Magician Heist franchise will be penned by Top Gun Maverick writer Eric Warren Singer, who will reportedly introduce new characters into the illusion-filled world of the films while also bringing back the original cast. Released in 2013, the first, Now You See Me, starred Jesse Eisenberg, Woody Harrelson, Isla Fisher, and Dave Franco as a group of magicians who banded together to pull off an elaborate heist in order to earn entrance to an elite secret society. In Now You See Me 2, Fisher exited, and a new 4th horseman was introduced, played by Lizzie Kaplan. Both films also featured characters played by Mark Ruffalo, Michael Caine, and Morgan Freeman, and the second film brought in Daniel Radcliffe as its charismatic antagonist. The story for the 3rd film has yet to be revealed, but according to Lionsgate Motion Picture Group president Nathan Kahane, we can expect a new and surprising narrative that keeps us on our toes. The Now You See Me franchise has been built on keeping the audience surprised and guessing, Kahane said. Any great magician knows, you can't keep doing the same tricks. And Eric Singer and his team of illusionists have something special up their sleeve for this new film. Spiral 2 ahead of the release of Spiral. From the Book of Saw, the 9th installment in the Saw horror franchise, star Chris Rock was already campaigning for a sequel. Speaking to Radiotimes.com, Rock said, I hope this movie is like Creed. In the sense that Creed is technically like Rocky 7. So, hopefully there's more spirals, and hopefully, I'm in more spirals. But, we'll see. We'll see if people like it. We'll see if people turn out. People have indeed turned out, with Spiral pushing the horror franchise over the $1 billion mark at the global box office. However, on its own, the numbers for Spiral haven't been particularly impressive, although it's also not abysmal when compared to other horror films or when considering that it was released amid a very odd theatrical season due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And even without knowing how much Spiral would make, Bloody Disgusting reported ahead of release that Lionsgate was in active development on a 10th Saw film, although that hasn't yet been confirmed by the studio. However, Spiral director Darren Lynn Bousman, who's also a veteran Saw franchise director, thinks Rock and fans may be getting ahead of themselves. You know, I think a lot of that sequel talk is wishful thinking from the fans, he told Radiotimes.com. But he went on to say that a sequel wasn't out of the question. The producers of the Saw films are very smart creatives, as well as businessmen, he said. And I think that, you know, if Spiral is successful, they'll continue it on. But if this has to be successful, fans have to embrace what this is. And if they do embrace it, I think they'll continue on as they have in the past. Chicken Run 2 in April 2018, The Hollywood Reporter announced that Aardman Animations, with Studio Canal and Path will be revisiting the hens and roosters of Chicken Run in a brand new sequel. While the follow-up film was originally intended for theaters, Netflix announced in 2020 that the streamer would actually be the home of the Chicken Run sequel. It seems the Barnyard is in for a casting shake-up, as it has been reported that the two lead voice roles of Rocky and Ginger have been recast. Julia Sawalha says she was not asked back as Ginger for the dubious reason that she sounds too old. As for why Mel Gibson might not have been invited back to voice Rocky, well, it's not hard to guess. The screenplay for Chicken Run 2 is being crafted by Kerry Kirkpatrick and John O'Farrell, both of whom worked on the original Chicken Run, along with Rachel Tunnard. As for the director, the film is in the fine stop-motion hands of Sam Fell, the filmmaker behind Paranorman. The story will once again feature Rocky and Ginger, now living happily in a human-free island sanctuary with their young chick, Molly. But when chickens come under threat yet again, Rocky and Ginger decide to leave their peaceful home to once again fight for all chickenkind. My Spy 2. One of the early theatrical casualties of the coronavirus pandemic was the Dave Bautista comedy, My Spy, which paired him with 9-year-old Chloe Coleman as the tiny, precocious foil to Bautista's tough-as-nails spy. The film was originally supposed to premiere in theaters on April 17, 2020, but ended up pivoting to a streaming release once most theaters shut down due to the pandemic. My Spy ultimately wound up premiering in the United States on Amazon Prime on June 26, although it did enjoy a theatrical release in several other countries. Despite being forced to alter its original plan, My Spy did well enough on Prime Video that the streamer is now exploring possibilities for a sequel, which would bring back Bautista, Coleman, and director Peter Siegel. My Spy follows J.J. Bautista, a CIA operative who gets demoted to surveil a family whom the CIA suspects are in possession of construction plans for a nuclear bomb. The family's young daughter catches on to JJ's plan, and in exchange for not blowing his cover, convinces him to teach her how to be a spy. Nothing about the sequel is official yet, including what the plot might be, but it's safe to assume it would find JJ and Sophie teaming up again for a brand new spy caper. The War with Grandpa 2. In a normal year, a movie like The War with Grandpa probably wouldn't have delivered an especially notable performance at the box office, although its low budget may still have made the idea of a sequel appealing. But in 2020, when many theaters were shuttered while many more were only operating at extremely limited capacity, The War with Grandpa was a surprising success, as one of the few movies that audiences had the option of seeing on the big screen during the coronavirus pandemic. So it should probably come as no surprise that a sequel already seems to be in the works from producer Marvin Pert through his Brookdale Studios. Starring Robert De Niro, Uma Thurman, Christopher Walken, and Oakes Fegley, The War with Grandpa follows a kid who is upset about having to give up his room to his grandfather and decides to wage war in order to reclaim it. Although the film ends with the two in a better place, the sequel, according to Pert, would revisit the family when Grandpa proposes to his girlfriend, and needs to meet her family from London. While there's no word yet on when we can expect to see The War with Grandpa 2 in theaters, we can only hope that when it finally does release, it will be under far less harrowing circumstances. Beverly Hills Cop 4. We appear to be in the midst of an Eddie Murphy renaissance. After gradually fading from the spotlight since his heyday in the 80s and early 90s, Murphy is suddenly back in a big way, giving a critically acclaimed performance in 2019's Dolomite Is My Name, making a triumphant return to Saturday Night Live as host, lining up new stand-up comedy specials for Netflix, and announcing a sequel to one of his biggest hits from the 80s, Beverly Hills Cop. Marking the fourth installment in the Beverly Hills Cop franchise, this newest sequel will also be a collaboration between Murphy and Netflix, after Paramount previously pulled the plug on a planned Beverly Hills Cop 4 Inches back in 2016. Murphy will be reprising his role as Axel Foley, the Detroit cop who repeatedly finds himself traveling to Beverly Hills to investigate various crimes. Beverly Hills Cop 4 Inches will be directed by Bad Boys for Life directors Adil El Arbi and Bilal Fallah, and Murphy says he's ready to go as soon as the script is complete. There's no word yet on when that might be, but considering Murphy says that we're nearly there, it hopefully won't be too much longer.
Bright 2. On paper, Bright sounded like it was going to be awesome. An urban set buddy cop movie full of elves, dragons, and fairies. The action comedy starred the ever-charismatic Will Smith as a human, and the incredibly talented Joel Edgerton as an orc. But when the film premiered on Netflix in 2017, it was thoroughly trashed by critics who attacked everything from its mishandled metaphors to its lazy worldbuilding. While critics were underwhelmed, the movie attracted quite a few eyeballs. After it was released on Netflix, Bright was watched by at least 11 million viewers. With those numbers, it's no surprise that Netflix gave the green light to Bright 2 in 2018. Although Bright director David Ayer was originally attached to helm the sequel, he later stepped away to focus on his Dirty Dozen remake for Warner Bros. Instead, Now You See Me and Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance, director Louis Leterrier will be stepping into the director's role, although Ayer will still get a writing credit for the original script, along with Beauty and the Beast and The Huntsman: Winter's War, scribe Evan Spiliotopoulos. Ayer and Spiliotopoulos' script has since been given a rewrite by The Maze Runner trilogy writer T.S. Nolan. Bright 2 will reunite Smith and Edgerton, this time taking them outside the city limits of Los Angeles and throwing them into a new adventure that plays out on an international stage. Tron 3. Although the original Tron wasn't a big hit when it was released in 1982, it developed a growing cult following in the decades that followed, which ultimately proved big enough to warrant a sequel. Tron Legacy premiered in 2010, starring Garrett Hedlund, Olivia Wilde, and original Tron star Jeff Bridges, reprising his role from the first film. Tron Legacy did well enough to earn a sequel of its own, and It Runs in the Family writer Jesse Wigatoff was brought aboard in 2012 to pen the script, after an earlier version of the screenplay was written by David DiGilio. However, Disney couldn't figure out how to best approach a new installment in the Tron story, and the project was put on hold. Now, the third Tron film now appears to be moving forward again, with Lion director Garth Davis coming aboard to direct and Jared Leto attached to star. While Davis is not known for the type of big-budget, CGI-heavy filmmaking that a Tron film would require, insiders say that he fought for the job, eventually convincing Disney executives that he was the right person to bring the grid back to life. As for Leto, he may have inadvertently revealed the title for the third, Tron, in a now-deleted tweet confirming his casting, referring to the film as Tron: Ares. Although the project has yet to receive a green light, Davis's and Leto's involvement may signal a light at the end of the tunnel for the long-gestating threequel. The Souvenir, Part 2. Even before it premiered at the Sundance Film Festival to great acclaim in 2019, The Souvenir was conceived as a two-part story. Writer and director Joanna Hogg wrote the first film as a semi-autobiographical account of her experiences in film school. Set in the 1980s, The Souvenir starred Honor Swinton Byrne as Julie, a young film student caught up in a complicated relationship with the troubled Anthony Tom Burke. Originally, Robert Pattinson was signed on to play the male lead in the second film, but he wound up dropping out due to scheduling conflicts with Christopher Nolan's Tenet. Still, production moved ahead on The Souvenir, Part 2, which will feature Swinton Byrne reprising her role from the first film, along with her mother Tilda Swinton, Ariane Labd, and Richard Ayoade. Although the two Souvenir films were conceived as a pair, Hogg says each can also stand alone. "It's another film," Hogg told IndieWire. "It's another film and it should stand on its own, not just as a two-part thing." As for the plot of the second film, Hogg was vague but revealed that the story won't jump forward in time. "Well, I can tell you that it begins where the first one left off," Hogg said. "I always find that, if I see something where it jumps time, I feel a bit cheated. So we begin where we ended, in a sense. We do go into Julie's future, and the story is much more about the processing of what's happened to her, and then how the processing of that affects the work she does, and her creativity. It's about her creative spirit coming alive from under the shadow of something." The Last Starfighters. Despite the better part of 4 decades having passed since The Last Starfighter first wowed audiences, the time may actually be ideal for a sequel to the film about a teenager who beats a video game, only to discover that the game was really a recruiting tool in order to find soldiers to fight in an interstellar alien war. Video games have changed a lot since then, which could present a natural way to continue the story.
Speaking to Moviehole, Jonathan Betuel, the writer of the original film, said of the sequel, "It's not a remake. It's going to continue the story. What's changed is time itself, certainly as the video world and the alien world have continued to tick away. It's not a time capsule of the 80s by any means, we're taking it to the next level. Passing the torch. Or the joystick." Betuel will be co-writing the sequel, titled The Last Starfighters, with Rogue One, a Star Wars story, screenwriter Gary Whitta. In March 2021, Whitta tweeted a sizzle reel that hints at the plot of the film, which would involve an alien attempting to assassinate an adult Alex, the protagonist of the first film, and Alex then heading off into space to get to the bottom of what's going on. According to Batul, the road to making a sequel has been a rocky one that's taken years, but he's optimistic it will finally get off the ground. It looks like we'll be making the deal to get it going, Batul said to Movie Hole in 2020. Gary's a gifted collaborator. We'll be writing the script together, but it's taken a long time. I had to go through a process that took years to recapture the rights, but that was recently completed, and although nothing is ever clear sailing, it looks like we have a really good opportunity now. So I'm really looking forward to taking it up. So while the sequel still has a long path to travel before it makes it to theaters, Batul is hopeful it will get there. Predator 5, yet another franchise that's endured for decades. The first, Predator, film tore into theaters in 1987, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Carl Weathers, and Jesse Ventura. And now, a fifth film is on the horizon. The most recent installment, 2018's The Predator, was directed by Shane Black and starred the likes of Boyd Holbrook, Trevante Rhodes, Jacob Tremblay, Keegan-Michael Key, Olivia Munn, and Thomas Jane. That film was hardly a critical success, currently sitting at a dismal 33% on Rotten Tomatoes, but it still made enough money at the box office to justify yet another sequel. Predator 5 Inches will be helmed by 10 Cloverfield Lane director Dan Trachtenberg, from a script written by Patrick Asen. Each Predator installment thus far has focused on groups of people being hunted by a race of alien trophy hunters. Originally, the fifth Predator film was announced as Skulls, and the plot was said to follow a Comanche woman who goes against gender norms and traditions to become a warrior. Later, Trachtenberg confirmed that Skulls was indeed a fifth Predator film, but he'd intended to keep that reveal a surprise before the news was leaked by Deadline. Still, even if the reveal didn't go as he planned, hopefully the fifth Predator film will have enough shocks and thrills to make up for it. It's definitely going to have an amazing lead character, as the hero will be played by Amber Midthunder, best known for starring as martial arts expert Carrie Loudermilk in FX's Legion. While the fifth Predator seemed to hit an unforeseen snag in the form of a lawsuit filed by Jim and John Thomas, the writers of the original film, that apparently hasn't stopped the movie from moving forward. Trachtenberg confirmed in July of 2021 that Skulls is almost done filming, which means we could be seeing it premiere as soon as 2022. Troop Beverly Hills 2. More than 3 decades after the original Troop Beverly Hills hit theaters in 1989, a sequel is in the works from Israeli filmmaker and AFI Conservatory graduate Oran Zegman, in her feature directorial debut. The script comes from Woke showrunner A. Shakar, with a rewrite by Moxie writer Tamara Chestnut. The original Troop Beverly Hills film starred Shelley Long as a pampered housewife on the brink of divorce who sets out to prove to her family that she's capable of more than they think by becoming a wilderness girl's den mother. The film also featured Craig T. Nelson, Betty Thomas, Mary Gross, Stephanie Basham, and Jenny Lewis, and included a number of recognizable names among its child cast, including Tori Spelling, Carla Gugino, and Kelly Martin. There's no word yet on whether Long or any of the other actors from the original will reprise their roles or cameo in Zegman's sequel, or what the storyline will be about. However, Ava Fries, whose real-life experiences inspired the events of the first movie, is back on board as executive producer, along with her husband, Charles Fries. This might indicate that the sequel could also draw from some part of her life, although nothing is official yet. Star Trek IV, Star Trek, has been a shining gem in Paramount's crown for decades, and there are a number of directions the popular franchise could head next. While there's definitely the intent to boldly take the established interstellar adventurers of the United Federation of Planets on a new adventure, the studio is also considering a couple other intergalactic options. Moving forward right now is a fourth Star Trek film in the current franchise, which would bring back the cast of 2009's Star Trek, minus, sadly, Anton Yelchin, who played Pavel Chekhov in the first 3 films and was tragically killed in an accident in 2016. The studio is also considering Trek films from The Revenant, scribe Mark L. Smith, which was originally intended to be directed by Quentin Tarantino, and from Fargo and Legion, creator Noah Hawley, which would feature a new cast of characters. While Noah Hawley's project has been moved to the back burner by Paramount's Motion Picture Group president, Emma Watts, Star Trek IV is full steam ahead. WandaVision director Matt Shakman has signed on to helm the project, working off a script from Lindsay Beer and Geneva Robertson-Dworet, making this the first Star Trek film to be penned by women. Production is set to start in the spring of 2022. Argyle. It's a little unusual for a sequel to make this list when the first movie hasn't even come out yet, but that's exactly what's happening with Argylle, the upcoming spy thriller directed by Matthew Vaughn. Apple Original Films is circling the rights to the project, which is based on the debut novel from author Ellie Conway, set to be published in September 2022. And even though the source material hasn't even been published yet, the studio already hopes that the film will launch a new franchise in the style of James Bond. The plot of Argylle follows the world's greatest spy as he is caught up in a globe-trotting adventure, and it will feature a star-studded cast including Henry Cavill, Sam Rockwell, Bryce Dallas Howard, Bryan Cranston, Catherine O'Hara, John Cena and Samuel L. Jackson. The script comes from Wonder Woman writer Jason Fuchs. Vaughn calls the novel the most compelling spy thriller I've ever read, setting the bar pretty high for the film. The Old Guard 2. With the open-ended conclusion of the 2020 Charlize Theron action hit The Old Guard, it seemed as though the film was begging for a sequel. Sure enough, The Old Guard 2 is in the works for Netflix, which will bring back star Charlize Theron as Andy, the millennia-old mercenary who, in the first film, realized her immortality was finally beginning to wane. Also returning will be Marwan Kenzari and Luca Marinelli, who played Joe and Nikki, respectively, life partners for centuries who were also part of Andy's group. Production is set to start in the first quarter of 2022, with Victoria Mahoney attached to direct, and while no plot details have been released yet, the first film set up some intriguing possibilities. Spoiler alert. After betraying the other members of their group and being punished with a century of exile, Booker, Matthias Schoenaerts, comes face-to-face with Queen, Veronica Go, a former member of their immortal squad who they had thought was lost forever at the bottom of the ocean. Although Queen used to be Andy's closest ally, who knows whose side she'll be on now after centuries of drowning over and over. Kingpin 2. For fans of the 1996 bowling comedy, Kingpin, you're in luck because a sequel is rolling down the pipeline. The original film featured Woody Harrelson as a former bowling prodigy who believes he's found his claim to fame when he discovers an Amish bowling superstar, played by Randy Quaid. It also starred Bill Murray as Harrelson's lifelong rival, as well as Vanessa Angel, Chris Elliott, Rob Moran, and Lynn Shay. No details have yet been revealed about the sequel, other than that Peter and Bobby Farrelly, who directed the first film, will be back on board to produce Kingpin 2. However, it's unclear whether the Farrelly brothers are intending to write or direct the sequel in addition to their producing duties. Similarly, none of the original cast is confirmed to be returning for the sequel, although fans would surely welcome another chance to see Harrelson and Murray unite on the big screen. Cruella 2. While 2021's Cruella was set up to serve as a prequel to Disney's animated film, 101 Dalmatians, by the time the end credits rolled on the high-fashion film, it was clear that there was plenty more of Cruella's story to tell. Sure enough, Cruella 2 is in the works, which will see Emma Stone returning to the role of Estella and her ruthless alter ego, Cruella de Vil. Also coming back is director Craig Gillespie and writer Tony McNamara, although none of Stone's fellow Cruella cast members are yet confirmed for the sequel. The first film saw aspiring fashion designer and petty criminal Estella scheming her way to the top of the fashion industry and usurping the reign of reigning fashion queen Baroness von Hellman, Emma Thompson. By the end of the film, which is part The Devil Wears Prada, part Joker, Cruella has claimed the Baroness Empire as her own and fully embraced her dark and semi-villainous persona.
Yet she still has a great love of dogs, particularly Dalmatians, which begs the question of just how she transforms into someone who would want to make coats out of puppies. Perhaps we'll find out. Or perhaps this version of Cruella will decide to ditch the dog skinning altogether, when Cruella 2 eventually struts into theaters. Bohemian Rhapsody 2. Despite closing with an explanation of frontman Freddie Mercury's death in 1991, the Oscar-nominated Bohemian Rhapsody, which followed the rise of the band Queen, may be getting a sequel. The film depicted the early days of the iconic group, from 1970 when Farrokh Bulsara, Rami Malek, first joined up with the other musicians in the band, through him changing his name to Freddie Mercury, rising to fame, and eventually breaking up the group in the early 80s. Bohemian Rhapsody culminated in the band reuniting for Queen's performance at Live Aid in 1985. There's no word yet on what the plot of Bohemian Rhapsody 2 could be or whether it would delve into the last 6 years of Mercury's life or follow the other members of the band after his death. It's going to be hard to follow Bohemian Rhapsody, as none of us could have predicted how massive that was going to be, guitarist Brian May said on an Instagram Live in 2021. We put a lot of heart and soul into making it and no one could have predicted its success, as it was bigger than Gone with the Wind. But yes, we are thinking maybe it could happen, but it would have to be a great script. It's going to take a while to figure that out. But as far as whether the band has interest in a sequel, May said, we are looking at it. Yeah, we have been looking at ideas. The Tomorrow War 2 mere days after the 2021 Chris Pratt sci-fi action film, The Tomorrow War, dropped on Amazon Prime, Amazon Studios and Skydance were already talking about a sequel. The first film, which also starred Yvonne Strahovski, Betty Gilpin, Sam Richardson, Edwin Hodge, and J.K. Simmons, centered around Pratt's character, who's recruited as a soldier to travel to the future and fight a war to save humanity. The sequel would reportedly bring back the entire main cast, along with director Chris McKay and writer Zach Dean. The Tomorrow War earned an enthusiastic reaction from Amazon Prime subscribers, who viewed it enough for it to debut as the #1 film across streaming platforms over the July 4th holiday weekend. So it's no wonder that the studios would be eagerly circling a sequel, although no plans are confirmed yet. And while we don't yet know what the story of a potential, The Tomorrow War 2, would be, we have no doubt it will be just as thrilling and action-packed as the first film. Crazy Rich Asians 2 and 3 coming off of the runaway success of 2018's Crazy Rich Asians, it would be surprising if the opulent film didn't earn a sequel, and in fact, it's getting two. Based on Kevin Kwan's books of the same names, China Rich Girlfriend, and Rich People Problems, are both moving ahead at Warner Brothers, although it may be a while before we get to see them. Due to the busy schedules of the franchise's A-list cast and director John M. Chu, who's been adapting Lin-Manuel Miranda's musical, In the Heights, for the big screen, it may be a while before everyone can get together again for the next two installments in the Crazy Rich Asians saga. However, producer Nina Jacobson says that the plan is to shoot both sequels back-to-back, so that fans aren't waiting years between the second and third films. So although there may be a long wait for China Rich Girlfriend, Jacobson promises, we'll make it up to them on the back end by shooting two films together. Gladiator 2. We thought this day would never come, but it looks like Ridley Scott is heading back to ancient Rome. Nearly 20 years after the original, Gladiator, hit theaters, Scott is finally making a sequel to the story of Maximus Decimus Meridius. Of course, old Maximus is busy walking through wheatfields in heaven, so what's the sequel going to be about? Well, according to producer Walter F. Parks, the film is going to start about 25 to 30 years after the original ended. And according to The Hollywood Reporter, Part 2 will focus on Lucius, the son of Maximus' old flame, Lucilla. While Spencer Treat Clark played Lucius in the first film, we don't know if he's going to reprise his role for Gladiator 2. We're thinking probably not. However, it does sound like Connie Nielsen, who played Lucilla, could come back. Speaking to Collider, Nielsen said that the sequel was still on the ledger, and when asked if she'd be willing to return as Lucilla, she said, "It would obviously be amazing, and I know that a lot of people want to see more of that." Peter Craig will be working on the screenplay, whose previous credits include The Town, both Mockingjay movies, and the upcoming Top Gun sequel. And with Scott at the helm, we're pretty sure we'll be entertained.
Edge of Tomorrow 2. Live Die Repeat and repeat the Groundhog Day of alien invasion movies. Edge of Tomorrow, aka Live Die Repeat, is one of the best sci-fi films in recent memory. Starring Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt, this Doug Liman flick focuses on a cowardly major who finds himself reliving the same day over and over. Unfortunately, said day involves an army of extraterrestrials dead set on conquering Earth. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Edge of Tomorrow 2 is officially in development, and Tom Cruise, Emily Blunt, and director Doug Liman are all expected to return should the movie move forward. Warner Brothers has also tapped Matthew Robinson, the invention of lying monster trucks, to write the screenplay. Liman seems pretty psyched about directing a sequel, and in the past, he's claimed Part 2 will be much better than the original film. Should a sequel take shape, Liman says it would be much smaller in scope, telling Collider, "I've always been interested in the idea of a sequel being more character-driven than the first film because that's not how things are normally done. That's been my approach when developing the sequel, and because Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt are such phenomenal actors. I get sometimes the sequel just has to have more firepower or more explosions, but no visual effect is going to top what you're going to get from a great scene performed by Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt." However, Blunt expressed doubts in 2021 that the sequel would ever find its way to screens. During an appearance on SiriusXM's The Howard Stern Show, Blunt said that while the team was all interested in a Part 2, logistical factors might get in the way. Honestly, I think the movie's too expensive, Blunt said. I don't know how we're going to do it, and I think that it's hard to align everyone's schedules, and I would love it. Doug Liman would love it. Tom would love it. We'd all love to do it. But I think until we figure out what's going on with the industry, honestly, I think we need to figure out what is the next roadmap for the kinds of films people want to make. RoboCop returns. Your move, creeps. RoboCop is back. According to Deadline, the cyborg star is returning to the big screen, although it seems this new film is going to mess around with the continuity. The original RoboCop was directed by Paul Verhoeven, and it made quite a killing when it was released in 1987. After 2 sequels starring original actor Peter Weller, the franchise was rebooted in 2014, with actor Joel Kinnaman and director Jose Padilla. The latest entry in the franchise will be called RoboCop Returns, and will feature a fresh cast. Though Neil Blomkamp was initially attached to direct, he announced in August 2019 that scheduling conflicts had forced him to depart the project, tweeting that he was excited to watch it in theaters with other fans. In November 2019, Orion Pictures announced that Little Monsters director Abe Forsyth had taken up the helm of RoboCop Returns. The screenplay for RoboCop Returns was originally penned in 1998 by Ed Neumeyer and Michael Miner, the same scribes behind the first film, and it will receive a rewrite from Forsyth. Of Forsyth's version of the script, Neumeyer had nothing but good things to say, telling Sci-Fi Wire, "I didn't want to say too much about what the script should be. I wanted him to have the ideas and not worry about any other version of it, including ours, and just do his own thing. It was very nice to be able to say that to someone like Abe with confidence. What he came back with was really interesting, it felt relevant and really crackled." Kingsman sequels. Although The King's Man, the third film in the Kingsman franchise, keeps getting pushed back due to the COVID-19 pandemic, currently slated for December 22, 2021. That hasn't stopped the studio behind the edgy action franchise from looking far into the future of the series. Marv, the production company responsible for the Kingsman films, is making ambitious plans for a whopping 7 more Kingsman installments. A tall order by any measure, but especially considering the second film was much more poorly received than the first, currently sitting at an unimpressive 51% on Rotten Tomatoes. Still, the franchise already has built in plenty of room for more storytelling. While the first 2 Kingsman films starred Taron Egerton as newly minted British secret agent Eggsy, The King's Man is a prequel focused on the early days of the Kingsman Agency. So while Marv is looking at 7 more Kingsman films, it's possible some of them could be prequels or spin-offs following other characters, rather than direct sequels focused on Eggsy. So far, we've heard of a potential third Eggsy-centric film, possibly titled Kingsman: The Blue Blood, and a spin-off focused on the American counterparts to the Kingsman introduced in the second film, titled Statesman. No release is yet scheduled for either of these films, nor any of the others, but it looks like we can expect plenty of Kingsman adventures for years to come. Young Guns 3. Although it's been more than 3 decades since the first 2 Young Guns films hit theaters, which followed accounts of the life of Billy the Kid, it sounds like a third film in the series may be on its way, according to star Emilio Estevez. "Yeah, it's definitely in the works," Estevez said, when asked by Collider about the possibility of a Young Guns threequel in March 2021. "The Kid is a fun character to play. There's a lot of speculation about what happened that night, in 1881 in Fort Sumner, New Mexico. Did he die? Did he not? And so, there's a lot of mythical, historical, and actually some factual things that we can examine, if we're serious about going back to that franchise, as well." The plot of a third Young Guns is a bit of a mystery, since the first Young Guns ended with the historical account of the death of Billy the Kid, and then the 1990 sequel was forced to walk that back. Whatever Young Guns 3 inches looks like, Young Guns co-star Lou Diamond Phillips has already said he's on board if there's a role for him. "If they can make it happen, I'll be there," he told Forbes. The actor, who played the real-life outlaw Jose Chavez Y. Chavez in the film, said he's already had conversations about returning for the threequel. "I got that phone call a year ago," he said to Forbes in April 2021. "I know that Emilio has been working on it, and what's even more encouraging is that John Fusco, the creator of the first 2 movies, is working on it with him. There's just enough ambiguity about Chavez's death that means he might have survived just like Billy the Kid did." In addition to Estevez and Phillips, the original cast of Young Guns included Kiefer Sutherland, Charlie Sheen, Dermot Mulroney, and Terrence Stamp, but it's unknown which, if any, would return for a third film. The Last Witch Hunter 2. When the Vin Diesel starring fantasy action film, The Last Witch Hunter, was released in 2015, it was far from a box office or critical smash. Commercially, the film performed significantly under expectations, and reviews were mostly abysmal, with Rotten Tomatoes summarizing it as grim, plotting, and an overall ill fit for Vin Diesel's particular charms. All the pieces seem to add up to The Last Witch Hunter quietly fading into oblivion. Yet according to Diesel, his immortal character Calder may be embarking on another witchy adventure after all. Lionsgate is coming and saying, "We're putting a writer on for the next one." That's kinda cool, Diesel revealed during an interview with Collider. And this is just recent, by the way. But it's funny that you mentioned Last Witch Hunter, because I'm in a meeting with Lionsgate and they're actively creating the sequel to The Last Witch Hunter. The first film starred Diesel as a warrior cursed with immortality after slaying the Witch Queen in the 13th century, and Michael Caine as the Dolan, a modern-day priest tasked with helping keep the peace between witches and humans. While it sounds like Diesel is sure to return for the sequel, there's no word yet on whether Caine or any of the other original cast will be making an appearance. Lethal Weapon 5. Since the first Lethal Weapon hit theaters in 1987, introducing audiences to the buddy cop duo of Riggs, Mel Gibson, and Murtaugh, Danny Glover, it has spawned 3 sequels and a television series. However, with no new Lethal Weapon films since Lethal Weapon 4 in 1998, it was still a surprise to learn at the beginning of 2020 that Warner Bros. Intended to reinvigorate the franchise with a new entry. Prior to the death of acclaimed director Richard Donner, who directed the first 4 Lethal Weapon films in addition to numerous other beloved films, including Superman and The Goonies, producer Dan Lin said that the 5th film was particularly special to Donner, who at the time was attached to direct. "We're trying to make the last Lethal Weapon movie," Lin told The Hollywood Reporter in 2020. "Donner's coming back. The original cast is coming back. And it's just amazing. The story itself is very personal to him and to the cast, and so I really want to make that one." Lin also produced the Lethal Weapon television series and claimed that Lethal Weapon 5 Inches will be a continuation of the existing films, with Glover and Gibson both set to reprise their roles. Of course, none of that may pan out now, as Donner passed away in 2021. However, following the filmmaker's death, there has been some speculation that Mel Gibson may take over directorial duties, although no director has been confirmed. Big Trouble in Little China 2. Directed by the one and only John Carpenter, Big Trouble in Little China is one of the wackiest action movies ever made.
This 1986 fantasy adventure follows trucker Jack Burton, Kurt Russell, as he's drawn into the magical underbelly of San Francisco's Chinatown. Hoping to save a kidnapped woman from the forces of darkness, Burton encounters ninjas, monsters, and an ancient sorcerer. But in addition to the hilarious action scenes and bizarre bad guys, what really makes Big Trouble special is that Jack Burton is one of the most incapable heroes in action movie history. Sure, he might swagger around like John Wayne, but really, he never knows exactly what's happening, survives only through dumb luck, and is constantly shown up by the true hero of the movie, martial art expert Wong Kai, Dennis Dunn. With its Mortal Kombat, warriors and magical sword fights, Big Trouble in Little China has become a beloved classic, so naturally people were a bit worried when a remake with Dwayne Johnson was announced in 2015. There hasn't been a lot of new info since then, but we now know that the new Big Trouble will actually be a sequel. Speaking to Collider, producer Hiram Garcia admitted, "You can't remake a classic like Big Trouble, so what we're planning to do is continue the story. We're going to continue the universe of Big Trouble in Little China." As Garcia went on to explain, the events of the first film will still exist in the new Dwayne Johnson movie. On top of that, The Rock will be playing a brand new character, not Jack Burton. So it seems they're taking a page from the Jurassic World playbook, by crafting a movie that exists in a pre-established timeline but also serves as kind of a reboot for a new generation. Unfortunately, Kurt Russell told USA Today that he probably won't be in the sequel, so we're a bit sad that we won't get to see old Jack Burton back in action. What We Do in the Shadows. We're wolves. While he'd already won attention with movies like Boy and Eagle vs. Shark, director Taika Waititi really broke into the cinematic consciousness with his supernatural mockumentary, What We Do in the Shadows. Starring Waititi and fellow New Zealander Jermaine Clement, this improv-heavy comedy tells the story of 3 vampire roommates just trying to get by and get dinner in the 21st century. The film wound up on multiple Best of the Year lists, and since then, Waititi has gone on to direct a little indie picture you've probably never heard of called Thor: Ragnarok. But despite his new job with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, to which he will return for Thor: Love and Thunder, Waititi is still eyeing a return to the world of the undead. In January 2016, Waititi told Crave Online that his Shadows sequel will focus on the werewolf pack led by actor Rhys Darby, werewolves, not swear wolves. In fact, he's already got a clever title ready to go, saying, "It's going to be called, We're Wolves, like, we are wolves." In June, the director explained the plot would focus on a power struggle between Darby's alpha male and Stuart Rutherford's recently transformed computer programmer. However, Waititi has explained that making We're Wolves is going to take a while. Speaking with IGN, the director said he was working on the story with Jermaine Clement, but the Jermaine and Taika works is a very long and slow machine. We put an idea in one end, and it takes about 6 years to come out the other end. And sometimes it doesn't even come out. In other words, We're Wolves is still currently creeping its way through the creative sausage maker. But if you need your Shadows fixed sooner than later, then check out the spin-off shows set in the same universe, Wellington Paranormal, and FX's What We Do in the Shadows series. The Passion of the Christ Resurrection. Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ focuses on the last hours of Jesus Christ's life, following the holy man as he undergoes torture after torture before his death on a cross. It isn't exactly an upbeat film, but despite the gore, The Passion became the highest-grossing R-rated film in U.S. history. With that kind of money involved, it's easy to see why Gibson is interested in a Part 2. Back in June 2016, it was reported that Braveheart scribe Randall Wallace was working on the screenplay for the sequel, which Gibson said would be a huge undertaking, called The Resurrection. In November 2016, Gibson gave some additional plot details on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. If you're familiar with the New Testament, then you know Christ's resurrection only takes a couple of pages, and there aren't any really dramatic low points or bad guys involved. When asked about the story, Gibson said the film would focus on Jesus' descent into hell, where the Bible says he spent 3 days before returning to earth.
Despite being 2 decades older than he was when he originally portrayed Jesus Christ, who most scholars believe was 33 at his death, Jim Caviezel, who's now over 50, will be returning for the sequel, and he's gone on the record as saying, "The film Gibson is going to do is going to be the biggest film in history. It's that good." As of the fall of 2020, Caviezel said he was still reading through drafts of the script, and he appeared as excited as ever to battle demons in the afterlife. Den of Thieves 2, Den of Thieves, might have been a flop with critics, but this heist thriller got away with $72 million at the box office. And in Hollywood, crisp dollar bills talk way louder than Rotten Tomatoes. So if you were hoping to see the further adventures of Gerard Butler and O'Shea Jackson Jr., then it looks like you're in luck. The two were reuniting with writer-director Christian Gudegeist for Den of Thieves 2. According to Deadline, the film will find Big Nick Butler on the hunt in the streets of Europe, closing in on Donnie Jackson Jr., who is embroiled in the dangerous world of diamond thieves and the infamous Panther Mafia. On top of all that, there's going to be a big-time jewel heist, so expect to see gunfights, Gerard Butler badassery, and familiar faces like Curtis, 50 Cent, Jackson. However, we don't know if any UFC fighters will show up this time around. Demolition Man 2, released in 1993, the original Demolition Man follows a cop who gets cryogenically frozen, alongside the crime lord he's pursuing, in 1996, and is subsequently thawed out in the year 2032 in order to help the police of the future catch him again. The film stars Sylvester Stallone as LAPD Sergeant John Spartan, Wesley Snipes as the villainous Simon Phoenix, and Sandra Bullock as future police officer Lieutenant Lenina Huxley. The film was a modest success at the box office despite a lukewarm critical response, but a planned 1995 sequel never panned out, and it seemed like Demolition Man would remain a standalone film. However, in May of 2020, Stallone revealed during an Instagram Q&A session that a new Demolition Man sequel is in the works at Warner Bros. Responding to a fan's question, Stallone said, "We're working on a Demolition Man sequel right now with Warner Bros. It's looking fantastic, so that should come out. That's gonna happen." Stallone didn't offer any further details on the Demolition Man sequel, including whether Bullock or any of the rest of the original cast will return, what the plot could be, or when we can expect the film to come out. Whenever the sequel does arrive, it will be interesting to revisit the film's vision of the future, since we're much closer to 2032 now than we were when the film originally came out in 1993, and as we've closed that gap, life has eerily imitated art in some surprising ways. Rocky VII. Despite Sylvester Stallone announcing his intention to retire the character of Rocky Balboa following 2018's Creed II, he went on to clarify that he was specifically done playing Rocky in Creed movies. Speaking to Collider in 2019, Stallone confirmed that he was done with Creed, because there's nothing more I can do there, before going on to say that he had an idea for a new Rocky film that the star, writer, and director called Vital. I have a thing that it's politically, you would say, vital right now, Stallone revealed. It's right on the edge. Also, it deals also with a foreign country. Well, you've heard a little bit about it, and they want it badly. While this is hardly confirmation that Warner Brothers will be moving ahead with a new Rocky sequel in addition to the already in development Creed III, Stallone's assurance that they want it badly seems to indicate a high degree of enthusiasm for his political Rocky storyline. Just what Stallone has up his sleeve, and why it's so vital to our current political moment, we'll have to wait to find out. The Expendables 4 Sylvester Stallone and The Expendables 4 have been engaging in a will they won't they dance for a few years now, but now, it's official. The muscle-bound gang is getting back together again, with Scott Waugh directing and Spencer Cohen writing the script. In addition to Stallone, the Expendables franchise has been a veritable who's who of current and former action superstars, including Jason Statham, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis, Jet Li, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Chuck Norris, Dolph Lundgren, Harrison Ford, Mel Gibson, Antonio Banderas, Wesley Snipes, Terry Crews, and Steve Austin. This time around, we know that Stallone and Statham are coming back, as are Lundgren and UFC legend Randy Couture. It's also been reported that 50 Cent, Megan Fox, and Tony Jaa have signed up for the film. Of course, these are still early days for the project, so we totally expect more Expendables veterans to return, and we'll keep an eye out for any exciting newcomers who might join the project.
Gremlins 3. It's been more than 30 years since we last saw the fuzzy little nightmare friends who can only be fed after midnight at the owner's peril. But now it sounds like there's a chance that the Gremlins could return to theaters in a new horrific adventure. Original Gremlins director Chris Columbus has been working for a while on getting a third, Gremlins, off the ground. A sequel to the original movie, Gremlins 2. The new batch was released in 1990, and he told Collider in November 2020 that it could still become a reality. "I would love to do it," Columbus said of a third, Gremlins film. "I wrote a script, so there is an existing script. We're working out some rights issues right now, so we're just trying to figure out when the best time to make that film would be. I would still do it the same way. I would do it as tangible puppets, not CGI. Maybe having, we had one stop-motion scene in the first Gremlins, but I don't think I'd use much CGI in Gremlins 3. The rights issues that Columbus is referring to as Warner Brothers, which gained the registered trademark of the name and franchise and subsequently greenlit an animated Gremlins series for HBO Max, Gremlins: Secrets of the Mogwai. Whether the studio will also give the go-ahead to Columbus's Gremlins 3 inches script remains to be seen, but we can only hope that Columbus will eventually get to see his vision come to life, as long as he keeps it away from water. The Social Network 2 released in 2010, the Aaron Sorkin-penned drama, The Social Network, chronicling the early days of Facebook, went on to receive tremendous critical success and win 3 Oscars for its screenplay, editing, and score. Now, a decade later, Sorkin is eager to return to the tech empire of Mark Zuckerberg, this time looking into what Facebook has become and the role it plays in modern politics. Speaking to MTV's Happy Sad Confused podcast about the possibility of a social network sequel, Sorkin said, "I do want to see it. And producer Scott Rudin wants to see it. People have been talking to me about it because of what we've discovered as the dark side of Facebook." However, although Sorkin and Rudin seem to be on board, there's one thing that could still stand in the way of The Social Network 2 becoming a reality: a commitment from director David Fincher. "I will only write it if David directs it," Sorkin said. "If Billy Wilder came back from the grave and said he wanted to direct it, I'd say I'd only do it with David." In addition to Jesse Eisenberg, who starred as Mark Zuckerberg, The Social Network starred Andrew Garfield as Eduardo Saverin, Armie Hammer as Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, Max Minghella as Divya Narendra, and Justin Timberlake as Sean Parker. Although it's safe to assume that The Social Network 2 would see the return of Eisenberg, there's no knowing which, if any, of the other high-caliber cast members of the first film might make an appearance in the sequel. Django Unchained 2. Ever wonder what happened to Django and Broomhilda after they blew Candyland to Kingdom Come? Well, wonder no more, because it looks like The Fastest Gun in the South is riding back into theaters. Eventually. Maybe. According to Collider, a sequel to Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained is in the works, and this time, he's teaming up with one of the most legendary heroes in vigilante history. Based on a comic series co-written by Tarantino and Matt Wagner, the sequel will find Django a wanted man after burning down Calvin Candy's plantation. However, he's still collecting bounties, and he heads out west to avoid winding up in jail. And that's when he runs into a Spanish nobleman named Diego de la Vega, who we all know better as Zorro. That's right. Django is going to team up with the famous masked swordsman, and together, these two are going to use bullets and blades to free the local indigenous people from some very nasty bad guys. That right there sounds like an incredible premise for a sequel, but it's important to note that Tarantino himself would not likely be in the director's chair, though he may serve as producer. As for the screenplay, we know comedian and creator Jared Carmichael, The Carmichael Show, will be writing the script, but we're unsure if Tarantino is just overseeing the screenplay or co-writing with Carmichael. Either way, this is a truly epic crossover, and we can't wait to see Django and Zorro shoot and stab their way through a whole bunch of racists. Baby Driver 2. Start your engines, because it sounds like a sequel to 2017's motor-tastic heist hit, Baby Driver, may eventually be zooming its way into production. Ansel Elgort, the star of the first film, mentioned in 2019 that he'd seen an early version of a sequel script and that he thought the film was likely to happen.
Wright himself confirmed in early 2021 that 3 drafts of the script had indeed been completed, but that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, he wasn't sure what, if anything, the next steps might be. As for what the plot of a Baby Driver sequel would look like, Wright told Empire in 2017, with most sequels, you have to contrive something so they go back to square one, unless there's somewhere deeper for them to go. I think with Baby Driver, there's more that you can do in that realm, and I sort of have an idea that if you did another one you would subvert his involvement in the crime in a different way so he's not kind of the apprentice anymore. However, following the allegations of sexual assault against Elgort in 2020, it's unclear if Wright's original idea for the sequel will work, if he'll want to center it around Elgort's character at all or if he'll decide to go in a different direction.